Okay, welcome everybody. I'm calling the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors meeting Friday, October 12th to order. If we could have roll call, please.
City of Carmel by the Sea, Mayor Burnett.
Here.
City of Delray Oaks, Vice Chair Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Brown.
Here.
City of Monterey, Mayor De La Sala.
Here.
Monterey County, Supervisor Calcagno. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. Monterey County Supervisor Salinas.
Here.
City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Camp.
Here.
City of Salinas, Mayor Donahue. City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass.
Here.
City of Seaside, Mayor Backoffner. City of Seaside, Councilmember Oglesby. Vice Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll soon be adjourning the open session and moving into closed session. During closed session, we have several items. We have a conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Government Code 54956.9/alpha. We have 4 cases of Keep Fort Ord Wild versus the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Case numbers M116438, M114961, M119217, and M118566. We also have conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, Government Code 54956.9b. We have 1 case there. Before we go into closed session, does any member of the public have any public comment with regard to our closed session items? If not, public comment is closed. We are adjourning an open session. We will reconvene in closed session in the FORA conference room. Thank you. Okay, I call the Board of Directors meeting, Fort Ord Reuse Authority, to order. Let's have a roll call since we have our ex officio members here right now. Roll call, please.
City of Carmel by the Sea, Mayor Burnett.
Here.
City of Delray Oaks, Vice Chair Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Brown.
Here.
City of Monterey, Mayor De La Sala.
Here.
Monterey County Supervisor Calcagno. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Salinas.
Here.
City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Camp. Here. City of Salinas, Mayor Donahue. City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass.
Here.
City of Seaside, Mayor Backoffner.
Here.
City of Seaside, Councilmember Oglesby.
Here.
17th Congressional District, Alec Arago. 15th State Senate District, Crystal Clark. 27th State Assembly District, Assemblymember Bill Monning.
Here.
University of California, Graham Bice.
Here.
California State University, Justin Wellner.
Here.
Monterey Peninsula College, Vicky Nakamura. Here. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Dan Albert Jr. Monterey Salinas Transit, Hunter Harvath. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Todd Muck. United States Army, Colonel Clark.
Here.
Fort Ord BRAC Office, Bill Collins.
Here.
Marina Coast Water District, Howard Gustafson.
Here.
Vice Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody for showing up here. This must be the biggest social event in the entire Monterey Peninsula at this time. So thank you very much. It may get a little warm in here with all the body heat, but whatever. We just finished the last hour in closed session. I ask our acting attorney for the authority, Mr. Jim Heitzinger, Esquire, if he will report out, please.
Members of the board, there in each item under closed session. Pardon me. Members of the board and the public, in each item in closed session, the board heard a report from counsel and in some cases gave direction to counsel. No action was taken.
Thank you very much. Since we are employing our attorney, we're going to really get the most out of him if possible. If you would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
Thank you, Jim. Okay, next, acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. I have a couple of notes I've been asked to pass forward. We've had some incidents occur recently that not only reflect on the facilities here, but also the safety of some of the personnel that we have. Everybody should understand that this building is not owned by FORA. It's owned by the Carpenters Union. We lease it through the good graces of the Carpenters Union. We are guests here. We don't own it. This building has nothing to do with FORA itself. Basically, what's happened recently is that we've had spills, trash left around, coffee stains. People have put footprints on the wall. At the end of the ESCA meeting, and I'm not saying anybody here did it, but it's an open area. Anybody can come in, anybody can leave. But a couple of male individuals went in and urinated all over the walls of the men's room. And rightfully so, it upset the carpenter personnel here, and they've asked us to make the announcement just to keep your eyes open. If you see any behavior that's inappropriate or whatever, please let one of the FORA staff know, and we'll take care of it. So we're looking at safety. Anybody that's mentally ill enough to do things like that is capable of other things too. So please, keep your eyes and ears open. It is an open area. I thought I'd pass that on. We've also had some vandalism in the field. Vandalism with regard to the ESCA lands, despite repeated requests to discontinue. 22 new or no trespassing signs have been torn down. An ESCA information kiosk has been torn down and broken to pieces, and other unmentionable acts have been reported. Destruction of private property is not an appropriate means of communicating dissent. This behavior is unacceptable and will only prompt more patrol and oversight. Please respect the work we're doing and the directives we're carrying out on behalf of state and federal agencies. I've had a chance to be here for a while, and there are very honorable people on both sides of the issue, people that really care about all aspects of this, from the veterans to the personnel that are interested in nature and preserving nature, to people that want moderate development. There are honorable people on both sides, and the side that's going to win is going to be the side that compromises or looks after the overall community. Violent acts or destructive acts or misdemeanors or felonies are not the way that we comport ourselves. So again, if you see anybody breaking the law or whatever, please let FORA staff know or let the police agencies know about that. And also, we've had some public requests. In response to several recent requests, FORA has provided an overhead projector and podium for use. The overhead projector available today requires the use of overhead transparency sheets. Yes, I guess we're still back in the dinosaur age to some extent. We apologize for this inconvenience and have already ordered a newer version of this technology which accepts regular paper. The new projector will be operational for the November board meeting. For today, if you wish to present materials on the overhead projector, please hand your items to the FORA staff member, Chrissy Maris, prior to approaching the microphone. The other thing, we'll talk about this later on with regard to the public comment period, but you should all be aware that there's an email address the FORA staff can provide you. If you have information to provide any of us, all you do is you type your email to this address, and that information comes directly to our inboxes. I've been getting message after message. I like a lot of my other board members. We read them. If you have something to say that lasts more than 3 minutes and you can't keep it within the 3-minute time period, go ahead and send it to us via email. We'll read it, and you can get up for a few minutes and say during the actual meeting. It works very well. If you don't have a computer, if you provide your information to the FORA staff, they will run copies and put it on our desk right here, so we'll get that information also. The idea is to assist a free flow of information from the public. You care enough to be here, we appreciate that, to us so we can make the best possible decisions. Okay? Okay, that's my announcement. To Michael, do you have anything else on this? Okay, we have 3 things on the agenda. The legislative report by Assembly Member Bill Monning, who's here. Thank you for showing up, sir. We appreciate your presence. It's very important. We also have a letter to the Marina Coast Water District regarding budget reductions. We're going to try and assist them anywhere possible to meet the shortfall in revenues. We're going to be very efficient over there, Howard. We'll do what we can. And finally, we have a letter from the United Veterans Council requesting representation on the FORA board. Will be referred to the executive committee for discussion and possible action. Okay, I've had several of the board members approach me. Today is a really bad day with all sorts of competing. We have several members have to fly out and make flight reservations. We also have the veterans that have another major activity they have to go to. So based on the request of the veterans and based on the request by several of the board members, we're going to move the public comment period to the end of the meeting tonight. That way we'll be able to get all the action items out of the way. Everybody can vote. In the very important discussions, we can go through with that. Okay? So next, okay. Mr. Monning, would you like to make a few comments here, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, my report this evening goes to the two pieces of legislation supported by the FORA board. I'm pleased to report that AB 1614, the extension of the FORA authority, was signed by the governor on September 30th, and that extends FORA's authority for 6 years, and some attendant requirements in that legislation. Also, AB 1842, it's our third piece of legislation signed into law, supporting the Veterans Cemetery project. As you'll recall, AB 1842 creates greater flexibility in how we fill the endowment fund necessary to reach the threshold to trigger federal support for construction of the Veterans Cemetery. So AB 1842 received broad support. I want to acknowledge the many trips and efforts of the veterans community, representatives of the FORA board, Monterey County, and all of those who have continued to work with us in Sacramento to try to align the requirements of the state Veterans Administration with the requirements of the federal government and the aspirations of the veterans community here in Monterey County. So hopefully that's going to give us some more flexibility in how we fill that endowment fund sooner rather than later, and get moving on establishment of the Veterans Cemetery. So those are my two reports on legislation, and glad to answer any questions, but I think you've probably followed this. It's been covered recently in the media as well, but glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Does anybody have any questions for the Assemblyman? If not, Bill, thank you very much for your support of the Veterans Cemetery and support of the board and of the extension of FORA. You've been critical in all three of those actions. Thank you for all your hard work. Okay. A couple of other things. At the end of this meeting, we will be adjourning in memory of Carl Niizawa, who passed away. Unfortunately, he was a good guy. Everybody that knows him was hit very hard about his passing. We will be adjourning in memory there. Also, with regard to the United Veterans Council request for representation, there will be a staff report on that also. That will be next month for sure. Okay, again, we'll move the public comment period to the end so we can get all of our business done. Consent agenda. Any member of the board wish to pull any items for discussion? Questions? Yes, Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick correction to the August 29th board minutes. The way it's written on page, let's see, it's page 16 of our packet, page 4 of those minutes. It's the way it's written. It says that the meeting was adjourned, and then Mayor Bachhoffner made his motion to reconsider the vote. Actually, when you watch and listen to the tape, what you see is that the mayor made his motion. It was seconded by Council Member Brown from Marina. The chair said the motion was improper and then adjourned the meeting. So the minutes should just reflect the correct order.
Thank you.
Things happened.
Any other items to pull? Out to the public. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Jerry.
Yeah.
First of all, I concur with that comment, and then also I noticed on the bottom of the September 14th minutes, at some points the footer says that it's the August 29th minutes, so that probably should be corrected.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other items from the board? Out to the public, any items from you want to pull, corrections? Yvonne.
I would like for you to tell me what items are available to be pulled from the consent agenda, because I'm looking at consent agenda. I see a recommendation, background discussion, fiscal impact coordination, but I don't know exactly which items you're referring to.
You pull items if it's not accurate. We're looking at the accuracy with regard to what's in the consent agenda itself. If you have any questions.
Yeah. Are
7A and 7B.
Are you talking about all the attachments or?
7A and 7B in the packet. It says consent agenda, approval of board minutes, or payment of utilities costs for General J. Moore Boulevard.
It's really hard to follow for the public when you ask if there's anything that should be pulled, I thought that the process we had gone through would make it more accessible for the public, for people to know exactly what's going on in these meetings. So I'm just not sure.
No, I appreciate your participation. What I'd recommend that if you may want to just check one of the FORA staff before the meeting if you get an opportunity. What we can do is go through specifically exactly any questions you have to make it clearer, and then you could bring it forth at that time. Okay. Any other members of the public? Okay, back to the board. Do I have a motion? With the 2 corrections.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Oh, anybody opposed? Motion carries.
One abstention, Chair.
One abstention, you weren't here.
I wasn't in attendance
Okay.
at the last meeting.
We missed you.
I'll abstain too, Mr. Chair.
Okay, 2.
Make that 3.
Do we hear 4?
Do we have a quorum to pass this? Okay, you're making things difficult here. No. Okay, old business, again, in the spirit of getting things done so that the veterans, they have to go, for the most part, I'd like to change the agenda. The order of the agenda, we've got A is Preston Park, B is base reuse plan reassessment, and C is Veteran Cemetery personal land use designations. I'm going to move the Veteran Cemetery personal land use designations first, so we can honor our veterans. We can go through this and let them go for their next appointment. Any objections? Any problems with that?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I will be seeking to have 8A Preston Park continued. I don't know if you would want to address that now.
Let's
people
hold
may
off
be
on
here.
that. If we could hold off on
Certainly.
that, please.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thanks. That may be a little bit longer than than I thought. Okay, let's start off with with C. And starting off, I believe, Jason, you wanted to start off with explanation, please.
As the maker of the motion that is coming back for the second vote, I know a number of other people, including FORA staff, have been looking at the fundamental question of what is the best way to get this cemetery built as quickly as possible. In particular, how do we make sure that we don't let another year go past where we don't have the application from the state into the federal government? And a focus, therefore, on what I understand to be the June 30th, 2013 deadline that we need to have roughly $1.5 million available for the state to take action on the application. I think that a number of questions have come up, and I've been working with FORA staff, and I appreciate the effort as well as working with Assemblymember Monning's office. But it appears to me that there are still open questions as to exactly the best path or paths, plural, to get us to a place where we do have $1.5 million by June 30th, and we do have the parcel ready to be transferred to the state or, in fact, transferred to the state. I think in light of those questions and ongoing effort, I'll be recommending that we table this motion and we instead direct staff to come back with a clear path, a work program for getting us a cemetery application to the federal government by June 30th of 2013, and a path that extends to the construction of that cemetery as quickly as possible. I've been working with Executive Director Hulmard, and I believe that I think we can do it, get this submitted this coming year, but it's going to require quite a bit of focus from FORA staff and quite a bit of focus from the board. And rather than, I think, taking action on the specifics at this point, I think the policy-making body of the FORA board would best be in a position to direct staff to develop a work plan that gets us to that milestone without letting another year go past. So as the maker of the motion, I would recommend that we dispense with that motion, and instead we ask staff to bring back a work program that gets us to June 30th, 2013 with $1.5 million available to get this cemetery moving forward.
Sorry. Other comments by the board?
Yes, if I could.
Yeah.
I would certainly support the idea to withdraw that motion and not have the second vote. You know, there was quite a bit of confusion at the September 14th meeting or subsequent to the September 14th meeting as a result of that motion. One of the things that the city of Seaside wants to do, and we would hope that all other land use jurisdictions would concur with this, is that some of the options that were on the table, especially option number 3, which wasn't voted on, and to a lesser extent option number 4, could be interpreted as giving FORA land use jurisdiction. And the city of Seaside certainly does not want to see that happen. So we had an extensive council meeting talking about this issue about a week and a half ago. And Ian and I are both back here to ask the board to consider implementing option number 2, which we believe in no way changes the previous precedents, allows the city of Seaside to continue moving forward with asserting its land use jurisdiction, and then ultimately coming back to FORA once we're done and asking for a consistency determination. So hopefully that's clear enough, and I think that that would be part of what we could do according to what Jason's asking for. But the city of Seaside certainly wants to make clear that we want to keep moving forward independently on what we do with our land use considerations, and let the FORA board know that this is coming forward at some point, and it would certainly be helpful for the FORA board to vote affirmatively for option 2, so that Seaside has a corresponding, echo from the FORA board, so to speak. So hopefully that's clear enough, and I'm sure Ian and I can expound on that if necessary in any way.
Okay, we have the maker of the motion and the land use jurisdiction wanting to withdraw. Next, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A procedural question. Shouldn't we be getting public input before we determine a course of action by the board?
I'm still at the board level right now. I'm just looking for comment from the board.
Through the chair.
Yeah. Yes, Ian.
Two points. First, before we go any further, point of order, I think he cannot withdraw his motion. If he said this is the second vote, we need to go ahead and vote it up and down. Secondly, my instructions from my counsel was to vote it down, and then we could talk about option 2. But my instructions were not to support the withdrawal of that motion.
Okay. Other comments by the board?
Well, procedurally, my point is, however, we best dispense with that. My point is we should be focused on the June 30th deadline and the work program that needs to be put in place to get this thing built. Like, let's stop talking about option 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's figure out how we get this thing built.
Other board members?
Well,
okay.
Through the chair, yes. Point of order. We can't even discuss withdrawing it if it's not up. If it's not appropriate.
Well, understand. Let's get the comments from the board first, then we'll work this out through our legal. We'll get a legal opinion on this. Any other members from the board? If not, out to the public, any comments by members of the public? Yvonne.
Yvonne Stone, FORA and Environmental Justice. I encourage you to not refer to option 2, 4, 6, and 8. Let us know what you're talking about so that we can feel like we are part of the conversation, and anything that is to be voted on or whatever should go out to the public first. After all, we are the people here in the community. We are the ones being used whenever a decision is being made, but we are not necessarily participating in the decision-making processes. Thank you.
Yeah, Robert's rules are such that the board discusses first, then it goes to the public. That's just standard procedure. Yes, Mr. Rubio.
Yes, thank you, board, for the opportunity to speak on this issue. Can everybody hear me? Number one, thank you, Mayor, for suggesting that you pull that and table that motion. I think it would have set a dangerous precedent for this board. And also, the city of Seaside has been engaged with FORA and the county since 1996 on this parcel. And I think the intent originally was to codify the actions that were taken in 1996. And I think that by moving this motion aside, you clear the path for making that happen. And you you secure and also codify the sovereignty of each land use jurisdiction within the former Fort Ord and their ability to determine what their future is through their land use jurisdiction powers. And I know that no one here wants to abridge that willfully but everything we do seems to have unintended consequences. But I'm glad that the board is reconsidering this, and that and my wish is that you would eventually come to option 2 and get it cleaned up in the reassessment process, since it didn't get taken care of so long ago when it should have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ralph. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and thank you, Assemblyman Manning, for all your support. I am Arnold Leff. I'm commander of the Santa Cruz VFW post, and many of our comrades want the authority to know that we in Santa Cruz are hopeful there will be a veterans cemetery at Fort Ord, and we are supportive to making that occur sooner rather than later. Whether or not option 2 or option 3 is voted upon by this board, whatever option is taken, we would hope that the board and the community would come together to support a veterans cemetery in the near future, sooner rather than later. Its importance is obvious, especially to us older vets, and we hope you will concur. We will have a formal resolution from the Santa Cruz Post in support of the Veterans Cemetery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service. Any other speakers?
Thank you. My name is Greg Nakanishi. I'm with the Central Coast Veteran Cemetery Foundation Board. I'd like to again thank the FORA staff and the board members for the support of the Veteran Cemetery. I would like to reaffirm that the veterans community is very interested in having the Veteran Cemetery at the location that it's currently planned for. We're not interested in seeing the location moved in the future, and with the possibility of prolonging the establishment of the cemetery for another 15 or 20 years. So that's point number one. Point number two, and therefore, whether you go with option 2 or option 3, the issue is let's establish the cemetery at its current location without the possibility of it being moved in the future. The second point that I'd like to make is, with all due respect to Jason Burnett, I do think that it's important that we move on one of the options, option 2 or option 3, and not go for another year kind of looking at how we raise $1.5 million. I think everybody that's been involved in the process clearly understands the process of the state certifying our application and the federal government reimbursing those monies. What we need is the money. Whether it come from Monterey Downs or some other source, we need the $1.5 million plus to get the cemetery built. So I would not like to see us push off establishing the cemetery at its current location under the guise of further study about what the process is. We understand what the process is. So again, I'd like to just thank the board and all of the staff members for the work you've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I've also been asked to make an announcement. I guess we may have people sitting on tables. There was a table broken, evidently, at one of our previous meetings. So if you're sitting on a table, please don't sit on a table. Thank you very much for your forbearance on that. Usually I'm the one that would break a table, but that's another story. Okay, any other members of the public wishing to make a statement?
My name is Sid Williams, and I, too, would like to echo Greg's comments. It is very important that we have the land usable when we can raise this money, wherever it comes from. Right now, our source seems to be Monterey Downs, and that's what we'd all hope to go forward with. If we continue the discussion farther and farther and farther in the future, that holds our project back, holds their project back, doesn't give us any money, and the cemetery doesn't get built. Keep in mind that these things that were brought to you to be done were told by you to the staff 15 years ago and just weren't done. So just have the staff do what you told them to do the last time. Do number 2, and let's get moving.
Thank you, sir. Any other speakers?
Reginald Clark, and I'm a retired vet. However, I do not support the present location for the cemetery. It's a beautiful grove of oaks, and there are other places. I realized that it was many years ago that this portion was allocated, designated for the cemetery, but it's not too late to change. And I feel that efforts should be made to find a different place for that cemetery, even though it's going to stall it for a few more years. I would not allow my remains to be put where they had to cut down a forest to make a cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public speakers?
My friends told me to be nice. My name is Jack Stewart, and I've been working on this project since 1992, diligently, both as a county staff member detailed to that project, and later when I retired as a member of the Citizens Action Committee on the State Veterans Cemetery. No, we're not willing to wait any longer. Be buried where you want. However, we have to remember a couple of things. We don't want to delay the project. That's number one. And we want the cemetery where it's located. And there's a matter of ethics. A matter of ethics in this entire project. You keep things straightforward, and just like I said the other day, when you ask somebody to go to the prom with you, that's who you dance with. That's who you buy a Coke for after the dance, and a hot dog. Of course, that's revealing my age. You have to have loyalty. And we've traveled a long way. Seaside has done its due diligence in this entire project. They did their due diligence. They went out and offered up this land for development for a couple of years. Got one taker. We're not willing to back up and do it all over again, plain and simple. And the last but not least is the city of Seaside. You must respect their sovereignty. You must allow them to recover from the financial hardships they endured upon the closure of Fort Ord. Two cities were hit especially hard. My city of Marina and the city of Seaside. The others were hit very hard also. But mainly these two neighboring cities really felt the economic gash of the closure. Thank you so much, and please support number 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Any other members of the public wishing to speak?
My name's Ralph Villar. I'm a veteran, Korean and Vietnam. 6 years we have, this thing is going to close, it's improved. 6 years I'll be over 90 years old. 6 years. I was ADCOT chairman for this veteran cemetery 15 years ago. I'm seeing comments be made now, 15 years later, by let's move the cemetery. We cannot move the cemetery. We have to have it where it's at. It's a beautiful piece of land. If you're denying a veteran that we sent overseas to fight for our country in Vietnam, Korea, and Afghanistan and Iraq, and not have a place to bury him, and they got to wait another year, you're doing injustice to them. Not only them, to myself. I may be selfish, but I want to be buried there. I fought for my country both in Korea and Vietnam War. I retired the highest rank as Command Sergeant Major. I was airborne infantry. I know what it is to fight. I'm not asking for much. But this body right here that's saying let's move the cemetery is very foolish. You've got to think of those veterans that have fought in the wars that are still alive that want to have a place to bury. We are given this land. We cannot move it. We must approve it. Every year I'm told we got to wait till June. Wait till June. I hear it again today. We got to wait till June. If we keep doing that, I'll be gone. I may be talking very selfish because I want to be buried there as a veteran. But there's many might like me right now. I'm not saying that I have to, everyone agree with me. But let's agree that we have to have something, and let's compromise. Let's get together and say we need the cemetery for our veterans. We sent them there. They fought for us. Let's support them when they come back. Because many are going to come back in bag bodies, and many are going to come back and die maybe 10 or 15 years from now. Right now, we need some place to bury them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Any other public speakers? All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Ingle. I can empathize with the frustration that is being expressed here today because there are things that have been left undone and been left undone for too long. And believe me, the environmental community feels exactly the same way. One of the most important mitigations in the Fort Ord reuse plan was that the cities of Seaside, Marina, and the County of Monterey were to develop a program for oak tree protection that would link large groves of oak trees in an interconnected open space system throughout the former fort. This has not been done, and yet developments have moved forward which have eliminated many, many oak trees. So there's frustration on both sides of this picture. The one thing that I would like to say is that I think it is a very wise idea to decouple the cemetery from a proposed land use decision. And the reason I think that that is a wise decision is because it will allow the exploration of all possible alternatives. And if we come back and everybody decides that the best alternative is to couple it back up, well, then I guess that's going to be a political reality that some of those of us who oppose it will have to face. But one thing that I would like to remind people in this room is that sometimes projects that are so controversial end up taking far longer to resolve than that ultimate decision for approval. And in fact, it could be a very, very risky thing for the cemetery at Fort Ord to keep it coupled to this particular project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
My name is Mary Estrada. I'm a citizen of Marina, and I'm a veteran, and I also represent some veteran organization as their chaplain. And I'm here to tell you that there are many widows, many, many widows that have had their husbands placed in an urn because their husband's last wish was a cemetery at Fort Ord, for them to be buried where they served their country. And I hear talk about trees and environmental and let's move it here, let's move it there. I believe that you've decided a good place for that cemetery, and not only your veterans deserve to be buried in the community which they served and where they lived, but also their widows deserve to have their husbands rest in peace. And how many years are you going to make these widows keep their husbands in urns on their fireplaces until we can get our act together and make a cemetery and get it built? And I support option number 2. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Jay Fagan, many of you know me, Marina citizen. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Did someone just threaten a veteran? Is that really what you guys are going to put up with today? I try to be nice. But it's hard for me because they talk about decoupling. There is no decoupling. We had 200 acres. That's the parcel, 178 now. There is no decoupling. It's 178 acres that we compromised. We said we understand the economic concerns of the city of Seaside. We understand the environmental concerns of this beautiful place we live in. So we'll give up 122 acres. 122 acres that we could put our honored dead on, we'll give that up. We made that deal so that you could have economic opportunity and you could protect those bushes you call trees. That's the decision we made. You guys approved it, and now here we are saying, oh, we'll decouple. Well, first off, you got a legal issue with Seaside. They're in an ENA. I don't think you can go that route, and you probably are aware of that. But now you're going to threaten the very people who've defended your right to stand here and argue about this nonsense. And then I read in the paper that this is this grand forest, and that Seaside has the opportunity to have a forest. What part of Seaside do people not get? I live in Marina, a place where you park boats. Seaside is next to that beautiful ocean that we spent decades and millions of dollars ensuring will last in perpetuity. And now we're concerned about the trees. I didn't move here for the trees. I moved here for the ocean. Moved here for this beautiful beach. But, you know, we gave up 1,000 acres of beach, as Councilmember Oglesby reminded me. So tell you what, new deal. You want to compromise? Give us back the beach. We'll put our veterans on the beach. You know, we die on beaches. So it's good that we're buried on them. Give us the beach. Since you don't like the ocean, now you want the trees, we'll take the oceanfront property. I think that'll be a good deal. But something tells me nobody will want to do that. See, every time we come to the table and come up with a deal, everybody wants to change it down the road. Everybody wants to say that, well, we'll come with a grand compromise, and everybody will get what they want, except for the people who actually want something. You guys, the city of Seaside they did all your homework for you. This deal is done. Move it forward. Get the job done, and honor the people who defended your right to be here and discuss this today. You have a wonderful letter in your packet about putting a veteran on this board. I think it's a great idea. You ought to put a sign up here, you know, that WWJD, what would J do? Change it to WWVD, what would veterans do? If every decision you made was, what would veterans do? This peninsula would be a hell of a lot better place to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Nancy Amado, City of Marina. Two kinds of parks. There's the unimproved park, and the National Monument certainly fits that bill. It's an unimproved park of thousands of acres where people can hike, bike, ride horses, enjoy the vistas, enjoy the wildlife. And then there are improved parks. And a veterans cemetery is an improved park, and people visit those too. And they come by hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands over the years. More importantly, it's a place where spouses visit those that they've lost. Many spouses, as was said previously, plant their husbands on mantles because there isn't a cemetery. Others plant their husbands in cemeteries far away, and they never get to visit the gravesite. I know spouses whose husbands are planted in Arlington. How often do they get to go and stand by that gravesite and talk and say how much they're missed and the contribution and sacrifice that they made? We need that for our veterans, and we need it for their spouses. We need a place where they can come and visit and talk and reminisce and maybe even tell them what the grandchildren are doing today. This is an important part of any community. We have hospitals where children are born and where people die. We also need a place to honor them when they're gone, and this is the place to do it. I'm in support of option number 2. Number 1, we've worked way too hard to make it happen. And number 2, I believe in the sovereignty of local jurisdictions. And it is the only option that guarantees the sovereignty of the local jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Connie Quinlan, a Monterey County resident. I watched my peers, my loved ones, my relatives go off to Vietnam. I watched them come back, some in body bags. I also watched them get off the planes and have the community pelt them with rotten tomatoes, jeer at them, and otherwise humiliate and degrade them as they return from war. What's happening here is just as bad. In Monterey County, we have combining Los Padres National Forest, the new national park, and the Pinnacles National Monument over 2 million acres of open space. Our veterans are asking for less than 200. I think that they deserve that. Please check out option number 2 and vote that way. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Peterson, and I'm another veteran who thinks we can find a better place. And if we really get moving on this, we could actually find a better place quickly. And that we should, I'd like to see it start moving on that. I'm not saying that because of the oak trees. If you look at the traffic patterns, this is just located in a lousy access place, and we can do better. One side issue, when Ralph was talking, he suggested that people might think him selfish. Even if you totally discount Ralph's military service, he's still done more than most of us ever think about doing in our lifetimes for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Dawn Poston. I'm a lifelong resident of Monterey County. My husband is a veteran. He very much would like to be, as someone said, planted here. I think that this has gone on far too long. We have both the land has been designated for the cemetery, and there is a means, an engine for funding it through the 2 parcels. I would urge you to vote for option 2. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Tom Mancini, I was just sitting here thinking about a few years ago, maybe about 10 or 15. I'm sure the only 2 people that might remember it would be Mr. Pendergrass, and I don't know if Lou was here. But sitting here, this is a land use issue. It's a redesignation. It's not going to change anything. To separate it would be ridiculous because it doesn't work without it. But about 15 years ago, there was this guy named Dan Albert from the mayor of Monterey who sat in the FORA board, and he came up with a suggestion to have Highway 1 designation. I'm sure Dave remembers that. And it was really funny. It impacted the only city it really had an impact on was Seaside, on what Seaside could do with the main gate area. And unfortunately, when he made the motion, it didn't pass the first time, but it did the second time because non-seaside cities all went along with the mayor. And so now then San Far got involved. And so I'm having like flashbacks here where everybody who doesn't have a damn thing to do with Seaside is trying to tell Seaside what to do with its land. So, it's a land use issue. It's a redesignation. It's not changing anything. Please let Seaside have option 2 so we can do our own land use designating. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next speaker. Any other speakers? Going once.
Okay, Chris Mack. Couple things. I understand that the last Seaside Council meeting, they voted on a resolution for the Seaside members of the FORA board to vote a particular way. I'd ask those members, Seaside members, to remove themselves from voting on this topic at this time because of predetermined outcome of their vote, given what was being said here, and maybe FORA staff offers some information. Okay, that's number one. The other thing is the siting of the cemetery was said that moving the cemetery may take longer. On the contrary, a site without controversy, a site that's more environmentally or less environmentally impactful could move quicker, could cost less, community could get behind it. It was said to us that the current site was land nobody wanted. Henceforth, the veterans took it. It's kind of appalling to see that the land the veterans got was land nobody wanted when in the past, I think Jack told the story, they gave the cities many options of where they thought a veteran site would be appropriate. And each time they were turned down until they were given this piece of property that the county, the cities, didn't seem usable for anything else. So why don't we choose a site that we can all agree on and move the veterans into a cemetery quicker environmentally, cost-wise, and time-wise. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
That's right. Yay, Navy. I'm Janet Parks. I'm president of the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery Project Foundation. I think an easy solution, if we have to make wise decisions, would let's take the map and take my felt pen, and we'll write on the map that area designated for the Veterans Cemetery. It should have been on there a long time ago, 20 years ago, when the land was given to us, and it wasn't. So now let's make it easy, correct it, and we won't have any problem. All of these people who are complaining about the trees being cut down, where were they 20 years ago when the land was given to us? When we had dedication ceremonies for the project? No one showed up and said, oh, you can't have it here. Now that we're on the verge of getting a cemetery, you're here to fight us all. Well, the veterans are not going to give up. We were trained to fight, and we're going to fight.
Hi, my name
Thank
is
you, ma'am.
Wilma
Next speaker.
McKenzie. I'm a citizen of Marina, and I've been here since 1953. My father, my husband, number 1 and 2, were both in the military. My father was in World War II. He was in the Korean War, Vietnam War. Both my husbands, one was in Korea and in Vietnam, and the other one was in Vietnam. I have 3 deceased people at home that I'd like to have buried in Fort Ord. And I think it's about time we do have a cemetery here. And I hope you all support that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Sophot Malik. I am a resident of Monterey County. I'm also an architect. And this topic seems to be pretty new to me, so maybe I may shed some sort of fresh light on it. It seems to me like the veterans, rightly so, need to be buried at a designated site. It seems to me that this site is linked currently with a project that can take years to be decided upon one way or the other. And it seems to me like Bill Manning, last meeting, came up with the brilliant idea of what he called delinking. Other people called decoupling. And then Jason Burnett came with a bright idea that he said that he will spearhead, if I'm not mistaken, a fundraising effort to make the amount of money needed to create the funds that otherwise would have been paid by this project available by the public. Now, I've never been in this military. I come from somewhere else. I feel for all these people, and I hear and I see they're crying for a place to bury their loved ones. It really is incumbent upon this community to rise to the occasion and raise this money, $1.5 million or more. There are a lot of people here that can do that. And please de-link this property so that it can go on and this project can proceed much faster than anyone in this room can imagine. Now, one more thing. As an architect, if there's a will, there is a way. And yes, there are oak trees on that site, and with clever design, this project can be built, and a compromise can be made with the oak trees at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Yvonne Stone for the Environmental Justice Network. I'm glad we clarified what we're talking about. I would like to make one thing clear. This is a military base. This is a military base that's been around since 1917. This is a place where soldiers from all over the world came to train, and vehicles and weapons and all this stuff was. Nobody was hiking and biking. Nobody was doing anything but probably trying to keep from dying. And what I'm trying to say is, as a wife of a veteran, those are the people that have first choice, whether I like it or not. Like I said, this is a military base, and it's the second most contaminated site, according to the U.S. EPA, in the nation. We're not looking at the folks. We're talking, yeah, we got Seaside, we got Marina. We have hundreds of folks living on Fort Ord that was living on Fort Ord at the time that the base was even closed down, that have been in accidents and hurt and sick and dying, that is not being included in these processes. We need to get over ourselves. We need to get over our greed. We need to stand up for what is right, and we need to sit down, not with our selected groups, but with each other and have common sense. There is no need for this, and it needs to stop. All these projects that have come up and that was built, where the heck did the money come from? I don't even know anything about the funds to build this place, to build the mall, to build anything. And we're going to leave a cemetery out and say, oh, we don't have the money. We had $10 million to relocate the, what is that place, the Officer Club, or whatever the building was that was supposed to be the museum. What the heck happened to the money? And then the building was torn down and the wood was sold. We need to tell the truth here, and we need to stop trading things that should happen for projects that somebody agreed on, that the average person in our community don't know anything about and was not included in the decision. Look around this room. Our communities are not in this room. A few, a handful, yes. But we need to stop playing these games, and we need to be for real and realistic and stop being so important. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. Lana Conley, Marina resident, and I'm the wife of a veteran, too. This is a military community. Lots of us many people that are in the environmental community are veterans or families of veterans. And I don't think that gives a person a special status when it comes to making land use decisions. I think that should be a community decision. And I really feel that that's falling apart when I see different jurisdictions making these decisions on their own and kind of abandoning the whole concept of the FORA plan that was put together so we could decide what to do with this gift of public land collectively. And I'm really rather upset at the City of Seaside members of the board that have already decided how they're going to vote without hearing input from the public, without hearing a staff report, and without listening to input from their fellow board members. To come in and have already made up their minds how they're going to just vote on something, I think is breaking the public trust. Someone asked, where were we? Where were the environmentalists, I guess, back in the day when the base closed? There was a really great report put together in '92. It was the vision of the Fort Ord Parkland, something like that. It was a really wonderful report. And what they were recommending and what Keep Fort Ord Wild is talking about is maintaining the base the way it was when 30,000 soldiers lived and worked on it, and building on the urbanized Army footprint, and leaving the wild and open lands and trees and trails and habitat the way they were when they were when the Army was active. And I would like to suggest that instead of ordering people to stay off the tables, that we open up that door right there and make this room big enough to accommodate everyone. I don't know, is there a simultaneous meeting going on? Maybe we could schedule that somehow differently, because I guarantee there'll probably be something on the agenda next month that will cause a lot of people to want to be here. So let's try to accommodate them so that there's room for people to sit down and participate in a respectful manner. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There's some chairs back here also. If people need chairs, so we can either move the chairs back to the room, or if you'd like to just come up here and sit down, there's some extra chairs just to make it a little more comfortable. This may go on for at least a few more minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. My name is Diana Ingersoll. I'm the Deputy City Manager for the City of Seaside. I'm here before you tonight so that I would provide you an opportunity as to what was the council's action, because in reading the staff report, option number 4 has option 1 and option 2. The option that the City of Seaside had adopted in their resolution is actually option number 2 from a previous board meeting, and that is to direct EMC Planning Group to include BRP land use concept map and tax amendments affecting the Veteran Cemetery parcel as a consideration in the BRP reassessment report. I just wanted to make sure that the action that the council made and the resolution that was adopted was not in relationship to the option number 2 under your discussion on your staff report, where option 1 and option 2 are coupled. It is actually your option number 2 from your previous board meeting that we refer to. It's very important to distinguish the two because keeping the cemetery as a whole as the 178.5 acre piece of land should remain intact. Currently, as we have indicated, we have an ENA with a developer, and therefore a discussion in any way, shape, or form regarding portions of this parcel cannot be made. And secondly, we feel very strongly that with regards to the process, you're doing a reassessment currently, and we certainly hope that one of the actions in that reassessment is to move forward and correct what was an action that was done by the board in 1996, and that recommendation from your reassessment be a priority and be acted upon once you look at the recommendations from the reassessment. So I just wanted to clarify that the resolution, again, is option number 2 from your previous meeting and not separating the two options of your option 4. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you start my time, I'd like to have the overhead presentation pulled up that I gave to staff earlier, and I'm going to start with this on the old-fashioned overhead.
On the arm, yeah, up and down. Some of us dinosaurs know how to operate that equipment. Can we hit the lights to make it a little bit more readable? There we go. Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you. It's a little old-fashioned, but it's better than the nothing we had last time, so much appreciated for having the limited overhead capability. I'm Molly Erickson, attorney for Keep Fort Ord Wild. I'd like to speak briefly to the process today. First, I'd like to point out that there is no resolution in the packet before you today. There's nothing that addresses option 4 or option 2 or 1 plus 2. There's really nothing, so neither the public nor, I can guess, the board has a clear idea of what you might be voting on today. Further, there's nothing that states any CEQA compliance, if any. And that's an important issue. I'd like to address your attention briefly to the overhead. If you can read it, it says the numbers do not add up. If you add the parcels described in the board packet, and I have described them here as parcels A through H, just like staff has done, and the acreage in that first column is exactly what staff has described, it totals to 164, a little over 164 acres. The staff report, however, says that there's 178 acres that you are dealing with. That is a sizable discrepancy. It's important that you all understand and that the public understands where that missing acreage is. if FORA does provide any information, and if you don't mind pushing up the slide just slightly, please. Thank you. If FORA does provide new information about the acreage, the public hearing should be reopened, because right now we don't know where that missing acreage is. To the extent that the missing acreage is in fact for the East Side Parkway, and there's a suspicion that it is, given some public records, that would be an additional illegal FORA commitment to the East Side Parkway in violation of CEQA, if in fact you are to redesignate it or to take actions that would commit FORA in any way to the East Side Parkway. I'd like to point out that there's also no map in the packet showing parcels A through H, so to the extent that they're discussed in the packet, neither the board nor the public really has that information before them. And because of that, the information you have before you is inadequate to make an informed decision. And now if you would kindly put the PowerPoint presentation up. Thank you. The issue is what kind of revised land use maps are being used by FORA. Thank you. The forward base reuse plan was adopted in 1997 and the EIR was prepared. However, the cemetery was not mentioned in the maps or the text of the base reuse plan at that time. Next slide. Here's a picture of the adopted base reuse plan. Next slide. But the adopted map, this map you're looking at, is not the one that's on the FORA website. On the FORA website is another version, one that the FORA board has not adopted. Next slide. If you go to the FORA website, to the land use map, that's what's circled there, you see what's on the next slide, which is something called a republished base reuse plan. It's from 2001. It was not adopted on the FORA board. There are 3 arrows on it, as you can see, that point to changes that were not adopted by the FORA board. Next slide, please. The 2001 revised map adds the Veterans Cemetery, VC, to the map and to the legend. The change was made by EMC Planning under the direction of Executive Officer Hulamard. Next slide. FORA has admitted that the FORA board did not take an action to adopt Figure 3.3-1, revised in 2001, and that's the one that's shown on the FORA website as the land use map. Finally, next map, the revised maps are inaccurate, misleading, and deceptive. We ask that the FORA board acknowledge that the revised figures have never been adopted, direct that the revised figures be removed from the FORA website, and 3, stop passing off the deceptive figures as the adopted official maps. Next slide. It is a crime, as I remind you, for a public official to alter or falsify maps in his custody. Next slide. In conclusion, it is time for the FORA board to put an end to the deception. And finally, the last overhead presentation, if I may, back to the old-fashioned way of presentation. I want to point out that thank you very much, sir. It is a violation of public policy for Seaside representatives to be pledged to vote in a specific way, regardless of the facts and public testimony before you. The Seaside representatives have become impermissibly embroiled in this controversy. The public process of FORA would be tainted were they to participate, because board members are mandated to exercise independent judgment. This is a $25 million
point of order.
$25 million.
I believe the 3 minutes
I'm
are
sorry, we have a point of order. How's the time?
I believe the 3 minutes are up.
Thank you very much.
And I thank you very much for your time, and you're welcome to keep the overheads.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, next public speaker. Any other public speakers? Yes, sir.
Sir, Kenneth Murray, Monterey County resident. I have not served in the armed force, but I have 3 nephews that serve in the Navy. One is serving 15 years, one 10, and one has just graduated boot camp 2 weeks ago in Chicago. And I just rose to say that it's a bad display that we disregard those that have fought front line for the United States of America, for us to sit here on land that they trained on, that they owned, that they gave you, and that the board ordered or directed you to do certain things with in certain cities. But it's a bad display in my eyesight that we can line the streets of Los Angeles and magnify the space shuttle that did great things for us and took great people to space on many trips, and line the streets in pajamas, take pictures, and have joy in seeing that magnificent monument of a vessel go down the streets of Los Angeles, disregarding any trees that have been cut down for the purpose, for its resting place. But yet we argue over a piece of land for the sake of our own family members and their resting place. It's a shame that if this board continues to come back month after month, argue and argue and argue, and not find a solid solution to this situation. Give the veterans what they rightly deserve. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
I'm Reverend H.H. Lusk, the pastor of the Bethel Missionary Baptist Church and the president of the Ministerial Alliance of the City of Seaside. I want to say that this fellow said he don't know much about the town. You move here and stay here 60 years like I have, and you'll learn something about this town. I want to also say this, that we're not crying. I don't see no tears from nobody that came up here and asked about this cemetery. We're not crying. We have no tears. We don't have to cry. I didn't cry when I went overseas for 3 years while I was over there. I didn't cry at all. And we are not crying now. I've had the experience for the last 50 years of carrying military people into the valley to the cemetery. And these parents, these mothers, and the children are saying that they're tired of going there. We need a cemetery here. To our mayor of Monterey, what are you doing about Delray Oaks? They're getting ready to build a city. What are you doing about Monterey? They have land on this peninsula. What are we doing about them? It's too bad. For the last 50 years, Seaside has been in the back. You have not given us an opportunity to do the things that we need to do. It is time now. Seaside must do what they need to do, or we are going to die. We got unemployed people in our community. Now, you're talking about this Monterey Downs thing. Fine, it Downs or whoever. You said you could raise $1.5 million. It's going to take more than $1.5 million for this cemetery. And we have somebody who's ready to put that money up. Either put up or shut up. This motion to table this thing and go about, that's out the world. We don't want to table nothing. We want you to solidify and approve this land so we can have this cemetery. Mr. Bill, we know that you think that most of us, but the idea that you came up with is wrong. You're going to set us back another 10 or 15 years. We don't want to wait. It's time that we have a cemetery here at Fort Ord. I've had sons and I've had cousins and brothers who have gone overseas and who have died over there, and it's time for the cemetery. We, the citizens of Seaside, was at the city council meeting, and we gave our city council instructions that they were to vote for number 2. And that's what we expect for it to do. Somebody said the citizens of the representative of Seaside should not vote. Why shouldn't they vote? The representative of Carmel is voting. The representative of Pacific Grove is voting. Everybody, and they are part of it. And we expect you to vote.
Sir,
that's what we.
Sir, thank you for your comments. Okay, next speaker. Any other speakers? Going once, going twice. Okay, public comment period is closed. Back to the board. I've checked with our legal counsel. We have 2 alternatives. We can legally table the motion, or we can vote it down. In deference to Ian Oglesby, he asked that we vote it down. Any comments or a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah. I wondered about that. I just, I think I'm the senior member here, and one thing that really concerns me, not mentioning names, but not one of us speaks for the rest of us. So when you speak to others about what the board will or won't do, doesn't necessarily mean we agree. I had retired from Fort Ord in 1994. I worked directly under the Directorate Plans, Training, and Mobilization. I know where those ranges were out there. There's nothing wild out there. They ransacked that area in their training. They did it in the beaches. So forget the word about Fort Ord wild. It isn't. Millions or thousands, I should say, of men and women trained in those fields. It was the best base in the world. We had the 7th Division, and back in 1994, my organization photographed the deactivation. I have a picture of it. So it saddens me that this happened. We have thousands of veterans in this area. We have activists here to and fro. But let's not forget what was here. I can't forget it. I can see the flags unfurled in the 7th Division. That brought tears to all of us that were standing there watching that. There was no good reason to close Fort Ord. None. So what happened? You closed the hospital down, one of the best around. And the veterans go looking scurrying, looking for help. They still don't have that help. So now you want a place to be buried, and you sit here and some of the activists sit up. I know these people, some I don't know. You have no right to sit here and deny these people a place, an resting place, where they were trained. And so I think, we had a motion, and I've never been around where a second action was denied on that motion. If Mayor Burnett wants to do what he says, I think what your motion does, or your suggestion, you take as sidewinding. I know the activists and what they do. If you go away from what we have been talking about for 17 plus years, then you lay a trap to this whole organization. I think we need to be responsible here, especially the voting members, and responsible. I feel a responsibility to these veterans. I've known many of them. I know those who have passed. So if you take another motion to separate the cemetery from what we have talked about for so many years, then you fall into the trap, and you will never get out of it. So I say, as the last person said, or next to the last person, stay the course. So if you really mean what's being said here, I say that I did not support the motion where last time was to separate the cemetery. I think the proper course, if you mean what you say, is to vote against that motion, clean the slate. We have two different suggestions here today. One is the Seaside option for option 2, and then we have yours. So if we clear the air here, vote against the last motion, I think it's proper. I think you said that. Go forward and let yours or let Seaside. Now, and not to mean to put you on the spot, but last meeting I was very confused and very disturbed. Seaside was not united, and if option 2 is what you wanted, it wasn't said. So, but now they've come forward. I've always supported the land use agencies here and voting members who have land use. And what they want and what they plan is all here, And I adhere to that. I respect that. And so should the rest of us, whether we live on the south side of the peninsula. And if you live here on this side of the peninsula, you should respect the land use agency, and not to represent special interests. Represent where you live and what these people, the land use agency, desire. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we vote down the previous.
Okay, before I recognize you, I think we're talking about a motion. It's not the easiest motion to understand. It's something a little different that we did. So I think it'd be appropriate this time that before we go with you, that we ask our attorney if he would read the motion that we're talking about.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. Earlier this evening, you approved your minutes of August 29th, 2012. In page 19 of your packet, you will find the motion. It's called the substitute motion. I'll read it to you. Mayor Burnett moves, seconded by Supervisor Parker, to direct staff to provide the board additional information, including a draft resolution regarding a fourth option that would allow designation of the Veterans Cemetery parcel independent from the endowment parcel. Following the recitation of that motion is the vote. It was an 8-4 vote. It was a majority. It wasn't unanimous. If you look at page 2 of your agenda tonight, item 8C, you can see that what is on your agenda tonight is a second vote on that motion. The mayor from Carmel has proposed to withdraw the motion. The second to the motion hasn't said, but I think those are your two options this evening. You either take it off the table or you vote on that motion.
Okay, that being said, Jason, you're recognized.
It doesn't matter to me how we dispense with this. The point is that we, I think, need to clear the table, so I was going to defer to my colleague from Seaside and move to vote down this motion, because I understand
Ian?
that's your preference for clearing the tables.
Yeah.
I think that'd be the best way to clear the table.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I made the motion, or I'll make it again. I move
okay.
that we vote down
okay.
The previous action.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I do have some serious questions relating to the presentation that was made as to the revised map and whether or not it was adopted, and also the fact that allegedly it's claimed that it was established that it was not adopted. Could the legal department or the executive officer address those questions at this time, or is there more time needed? FORA has got enough problems litigation-wise, and if these are serious questions that needs to be answered, and if there's also the fact the resolution isn't attached and the staff report does say it is attached, I'd like to have, before we have a vote, some of those questions, if not all of them, answered. Thank you.
Members of the board, I think the first question was about the 2001 republished version map of the base reuse plan. And so, unfortunately, what was provided in the presentation to the board by Ms. Erickson didn't include the full response and the FORA staff response to that public records request. Basically, when the FORA board adopted the base reuse plan in 1996, it included a number of errata and changes to the base reuse plan and base reuse plan EIR. And the city of Monterey at the time wrote a letter to the board, which was included in that board packet, asking the board to adopt a final base reuse plan that included these errata changes. And so the board went forward with those changes, and that was the 2001 republished base reuse plan. And it's true that there wasn't a formal board action to accept that 2001 republished base reuse plan, but that was a project funded by the board as a result of the adoption of the base reuse plan in 1997.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need a little clarification. So are we voting on the, are we taking a second vote on this
yes.
motion? And
yes.
so Mayor Burnett's motion was essentially signaling his interest in doing that. Okay, so I would just like to say that I still favor this motion, and the only comment I'll make is that I just hope that as we take actions, the idea behind that motion was to try to maximize options for greatest speed and a set of options for the Veterans Cemetery. And I just am concerned that by doing something other than what was proposed, that we are going to be creating problems for the Veterans Cemetery, and I would hate to have that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commenting on this motion, I just want to affirm my singular interest is seeing the establishment of the Veterans Cemetery at the site designated in 1996. And for those who suggest that it's simply a matter of exploring alternative sites at this point denies the investment not only of time and energy and commitment of the veterans community and the FORA board, but in fact resources of the federal government and the state of California that have moved forward in reliance upon votes taken by this board as early as 1996 to designate the Veterans Cemetery parcel as the site for the Veterans Cemetery. I heard the motion of Mayor Burnett at the last meeting asking for information, not posing a substantive vote to delink parcels. It sought information only. I understand the spirit of the motion today, and I think part of the spirit of that motion today to vote down that option 4 is to appropriately recognize that it is the local land use jurisdictions that have primary land use authority. So with respect to the Veterans Cemetery parcel, that would be the city of Seaside and the county of Monterey. It's my belief that their actions take precedent and then face consistency evaluation by the board. And I think one of the concerns raised at the last meeting was seeking for this board to make a designation that is appropriately in the province of the local land use jurisdictions. I think by defeating option 4 today, we deny ourselves gaining the information that it sought. It was not a substantive resolution. It was a resolution seeking further information. That said, I think we can still pursue that information. If you look at the record from 1996 to the present, there's been no doubt in the minds of the federal government, the state government, the FORA board, the city of Seaside, or any other jurisdiction of the designation of this site for the Veterans Cemetery. It was in 2006 that my predecessor, John Laird, successfully introduced legislation to allow the designation of part of that parcel as an endowment parcel for the purpose of sale to generate the necessary money to fund an endowment fund maintained by the state designed to trigger the federal contribution to the establishment of the cemetery. The concern is that if a singular designation of the endowment would lead to impeding progress of establishing the Veterans Cemetery, we should not foreclose options that would allow a more expeditious achievement of building the cemetery at the designated site. So I just want to be clear. I'm not a voting member here, and despite some of the friction, the confusion, the dissent, as messy as it has been, the time that has elapsed since the last vote has provoked a greater engagement of the public, of the media, of different stakeholders to understanding this history. And for me, that ensuing month of conversation and public discourse has only resulted in the further affirmation of the commitment of stakeholders to establishment of the Veterans Cemetery at the designated site of the Veterans Cemetery. So again, I'm a non-voting member. As messy and distressing as this has been to veterans community, to environmental community, and to others, this is exactly the importance of this board pursuing in a deliberate manner, but at this point, the most expeditious manner possible to establish the Veterans Cemetery at the designated site. So I do believe in deference to the maker of the motion at the last meeting, I'll observe the outcome of this vote and what that leads to in terms of the designation of other available options. My commitment, the work that I've done in Sacramento in collaboration with the FORA board, the veterans community, and other electeds in Monterey County, is the time is now to move forward and establish the Veterans Cemetery at the designated site. I think Mr. Arago from Congressman Farr's office might want to just add, on behalf of Congressman Farr, underscore that the federal commitment to this project does not necessarily transfer to some alternative site. You have a different Congress today. You have a different budget situation. And if you think you can get the federal government in its current configuration to agree to an alternative site, it's wishful thinking. So I encourage the FORA board to move forward in a manner that moves us towards the designated site for the Veterans Cemetery and preserves the options for us mobilizing the money in the most expeditious manner possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And it should be noted that both the federal and state governments had to sign off on that site, and if we try and change it, we could jeopardize funding at both the state and federal level. Mr. Arago, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you. On behalf of Congressman Farr, who couldn't be here tonight, I want to echo what Assemblyman Monning said. Mr. Farr has been involved with the Veterans Cemetery at Fort Ord before there was a site designated, going back to the early 90s when the idea first percolated within the veterans community. He remains unwaveringly committed to this a cemetery at the designated site. Moving it, trying to move it would entail all kinds of delays and problems, and it's a good site, and we want to see the cemetery developed there. Whether it's a national cemetery, we've been trying to push that effort. It's for lots of reasons. It's we've run into pretty inflexible rules with the VA, and we're pushing the cemetery, the state cemetery version, which the community here has been really behind and trying to organize, and Mr. Monning and his predecessors have been very aggressive in trying to make work at the state level, and now is not the time to move that. If it's going to be done, it's going to be done at this site, and it will be done, and Mr. Farr wants to see that happen. I think the just for folks to understand, I mean, what the structure we're talking about is a state-run cemetery, but if the state commits to run that cemetery, the federal government will commit to pay for its construction costs. At this point, about a $28 million estimated construction cost. And for the last, about 4 years, we've had the VA state cemetery program sort of on notice, waiting for an application to come from the state of California, and we're essentially have a guarantee we go to the front of the line when that happens. So we're holding the door open. We're waiting for you to come. Please come while we're holding the door open.
Thank you, Mr. Arago.
Thank you.
Okay, Chuck.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
As a point of order, I would like to second the motion to vote down the. Yeah.
Just call for it. There's no second.
Been a second.
No. Don't need a second.
Need a second
no.
in this organization?
Okay, we have a motion before the board. There's no second required.
Then I'll call for the question.
Okay.
Hang on. Point of clarification here. I'm sure one of the reasons that Ian said we need to take the action that he suggested, which is to vote down the previous motion from our last meeting, is that I indicated very clearly at the October 4th meeting of the Seaside City Council that the master resolution of FORA requires a second vote. Now, we've convoluted things here a little bit because Jason has made a motion to vote down the motion, which realistically, in my opinion, means that we have to vote yes to vote no. That's a mess. So let's make
to
really
be clear. I'm just signaling my intent for a no vote.
You're asking for a second vote. You're asking for the second vote? Is that?
I am signaling my intent to vote no when this comes back for the second vote, which I think it is now ready to do so. And
so voting no kills option 4.
Felix, through the chair. This is going to be tough enough as it is. We'll be here all night. So voting yes will kill the vote, is what we're saying.
No.
Okay. Okay, no, it's the no vote that kills the vote. Everybody have that straight. The no vote kills the. Even I have it straight. Okay, we have a motion before.
On the question.
Yes.
I'll go quick, Chair. I just want to thank Assemblyman Monty for correcting the record. Quite a few people tried to throw you underneath the bus because there was confusion out here about exactly what this motion was, and it was just information.
Right.
But somehow and people was led to believe that we were really going to take some action. But it was the confusion that was out there, so I'm glad it's straight now, but it still needs to go down.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, we're ready for the vote. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We have one aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Nay. No. Okay, it looks like the nays have it. Now, we're basically back to square one. Where do we want to go from here?
So now
I'll recognize the land use jurisdiction representative as starting this off.
Thank you, Chair. So what the City of Seaside would like to do is move forward in the process, whatever that process might be, so that we can assert our interest to move forward with option number 2. Our city staffer, Diana Ingersoll, I think identified very clearly what that is. If we can vote on that today, fantastic. If we can't, then we'd like it agendized for the next possible meeting.
So the City of Seaside representative is asking that the a decision, land use jurisdiction decision for option number 2 be agendized for the next board meeting we have. Is that correct?
Can I ask a question? Clarification. Is it necessary to give that direction in some sort of formalized vote? I mean, wouldn't it just take place naturally through the process of recommendations through the base reuse plan? So I'm just asking for a clarification if it's necessary for us to go through this process, or if it's already being done and Seaside would want to make that recommendation to EMC in a letter through this process that's going on right now, or other board members would want to do that. Do we need to formalize it with some sort of vote? It's a clarification question.
From the City of Seaside's vantage point, we would like it clear with the board, at a board meeting that the board is taking that action to add it to the base reuse plan reassessment. Ian, do you want to add some further clarity? I understand your question, but the City of Seaside just wants to be very clear.
Ian, go ahead.
Okay, I want to make sure you're running a meeting.
Yes, okay. It's getting a little. Go ahead.
I move option number 2.
Okay, we have a motion. Well, we can't. My understanding. I'll go through our legal. Hold on a second.
The only action that was on the agenda tonight was a second vote on the motion that was introduced at the last meeting. You've already voted on that. That's it. That's it. I understand, and I'm new here, but I understand agendas are set by the executive committee. The land use jurisdiction has expressed its desire to have this matter come back before this board at the next meeting, and I'm sure the executive committee will get that message.
Let me just, can I through the chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
My understanding is this is an action item for the Veteran Cemetery parcel land designation use, second vote. Well, the original motion went down, so it's open for action.
But we cannot have a second, we cannot have a vote on a motion until it's brought before on the agenda. It has to be on next month's agenda. So what I'm asking is if we need some sort of a motion to put something on the agenda, we can bring it back next time for a vote, either up or down. Yes.
Simply a procedural observation. We do also have on the agenda the base reuse plan reassessment, receipt of the final scoping report. Right. It's possible that in the context of that, we could provide further direction.
Okay. Back to Ian.
This is the last point. Through the chair, if you're looking for direction, I move that we bring option number 2 back, or agendize option number 2 for a vote as soon as possible.
We have a motion there.
Second.
Okay, discussion by the board. Out to the public for discussion. Any comments?
Again,
I'm just more public input.
Well, hold on a sec. Yeah, let the public go through and we'll bring it back to you. You'll have a chance.
Okay, I have a question. Since the genesis of this whole discussion was its staff report and the action anticipated at the last meeting, does it not go back to that same staff report and action anticipated by this board at that meeting? Since this motion has failed, you have still got an open staff report and action that was not completed from the last meeting. So, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but it seems that that's the line that goes through this whole thing. The bright line that goes through here is that you had a unresolved action from the board from the last meeting, and when you took this vote, taking off an option that was never agendized, that was never agendized and there was no public comment taken on at the last meeting, that issue carries over, that it's still a live issue, it's still a live staff report, it's still a live action necessary to be taken. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, back to Justin right now.
I'm just, again, trying to understand why the board would give a particular direction premature to something. I would think that how the base reuse process has been going forward at this point is that individual jurisdictions have been submitting, or individual stakeholders have been submitting recommendations, and they're being evaluated and moving forward. And so I think that that would be the most proper format than the entire board coming together and collectively saying, we want this done right now. And so afterwards, when that report comes back, then it would be proper for the board to weigh in. But at this time, it would seem that how we're working this process, individual stakeholders need to be making those sort of remarks. And so if collectively, individually, folks want to do that, I think that that's the right channel. But instead of the board making a direction to EMC prematurely, I think we get the report back from EMC. Then if a board wants to react upon what those recommendations or options are, then it would be appropriate. So it's a timing process, and I'm just confused that, because I think if we start this precedent, then you're going to have other sort of individual board members that have priorities, like the university saying, well, why can't we get the entire board to support some of our priorities on everything? And so I just think it's a scary, slippery slope process we're going down if we're starting this process. I just want to raise that option.
Okay, thank you. Dennis.
I'm a little confused. We may do it a little differently, but I want to be clear, because I saw the word action associated with all of this. If one motion goes down, I'm confused why we can't proceed to Seaside's direction, because we have seen what item 2 was in previous meetings. Otherwise, I think there should be a new motion, which is to send Senator or Assemblymember Monty back to Sacramento and see if we can get a 12-year extension, because we seem to have to do everything twice, if not 3 times. So my question for council, and frankly, regardless of what side anyone is on the issue, I think people would love to end the suspense and find out what's going to happen. It doesn't matter what you're for or against, but let's start calling for questions and moving at the speed of the community, right. Regardless of what the answer is, because we're not paid for this board, are we? So we're not paid here to make decisions.
Right.
But you know what? Let's make some. Now, so my question to council, and if the answer is no, it's no. But I can't believe at a minimum we can't provide direction to bring back what Seaside would like us to consider. Right. And or how about this? Why don't we solve it? If we've already seen the information, and we have, and we all know the dance that's going on here, we all know. So let's just get to it, if we legally can. And frankly, I will say this in terms of how agendas get set. Agendas ought to get set with an orientation towards resolution. I mean, this is no surprise. Whatever Seaside was going to do, they were going to provide direction, and we should have been set up to act. And I've got to tell you, and I freely acknowledge there are people of goodwill on both sides of this issue, but you know, the pain in the veterans tonight, those you know what, this is starting to border a little on unfair and cruel. It is time to get to it. If we legally can, we should. If we legally can not, and can we legally provide direction that it's agendized and teed up, then let's do that. And if that requires a motion, then I'll make it.
Dennis, thank you. We've got 2 questions brought before. We'll turn it over to our attorney. Dennis Donahue has a question. Ralph Rubio had a question from the stand. If you could answer both those questions, please.
In answer to Mayor Donahue's question, it's not proper to go forward with anything other than the second vote this evening. It's analogous to a situation you face many times in your own city when you have a second vote on an ordinance.
That doesn't mean I don't try.
You've got to wait till next time.
I'm running out of those.
I'm sure that again, I'm not familiar with how agendas get set here or agenda items get drawn or labeled, but I would imagine that both the executive committee and the FORA staff has heard the sentiment of this board loud and clear, and you're going to get something on your agenda next time that's comprehensive enough so you can consider options which address everyone's needs.
Thank you.
Ian, I believe you had a motion on the floor.
Well, my motion was to direct staff to come back at the next meeting with option 2.
Okay.
Clear, simple.
Okay.
We went through 1 through 4. We know which one we don't want, and so I'm putting forward the one I think. I know after listening to everybody, taking in new information. I didn't come here with any perceived notions, but I know we support number 2. So okay. I would like the board to have an opportunity to vote up or down option number 2.
We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
My only concern is if we limit it just to bring back number 2, and that's voted down, are we then looking at coming back a second time, a fourth time, a 10th time for 1 and 3?
It's what we do.
Could you just broaden your motion to include those, and then we can still address the question of 2 as well as the other 2? That's my only thought on that. Thank you.
With respect, no. I think we're just going to have to stand up. We're going to stand for the cemetery or we're going to stand against it.
Okay, we have an option and a second on the floor. I'm going to call for the question. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Unanimous. Oh, okay. Question after the fact.
Somewhere back in 2000 or 201, I went to the site in 201 or 202, and we had a display and a map of property, and it was the Veterans Cemetery, and we had a ribbon ceremony and a ribbon cutting, and everything was set. Why are we here today? What's going on that's taken from somewhere in 201 or 202, and now all of a sudden the boundaries change, everything has changed? I mean, this is bureaucracy at its worst.
Lou, it's complicated, to say the least. If you have about an hour after this meeting, the FORA staff will brief you on the correct procedures were not quite followed. So, okay, we had a unanimous vote on that. I thank you very much for your cooperation. We'll bring this back the next meeting. Next item on the agenda. We'll be going through 8A, that's Preston Park fiscal year 2012-2013 budget. Michael, you want to take this away?
May I, at this time, make my motion?
Okay.
Do you want to wait till it clears out a little bit?
Yeah, let's wait till it clears out, and then we can talk. Okay, while we're waiting here and waiting for the place to clear, could I have a motion to continue the meeting past 5:30?
So moved.
Do I have a second? A second? Okay, thank you very much, Bill. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Oh, you all love being here, huh? Okay.
Could you ask the people that are talking to go outside so we can hear, please?
you want to close the door back there, and that way we'll have a little bit more quiet in here? Please, just close the door. Just one, maybe, or we'll lock them out. Okay, we're going with 8A right now. We'll start off. We've asked Mr. O'Connell's asked to make a statement about 8A to start off with. Mr. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, what I'm requesting is that this matter be continued to November 16, 2012. If I have a second, I would like to have the opportunity to explain why I'm making the motion. Basically, what the reason is for the motion is on September 14th, I submitted additional questions which are not in the staff report, nor are the responses, to the Preston Park budget. And I followed that up on September 22nd, requesting again responses to those questions so that I could review them as to completeness and answer some questions that not only I had, but people who are very concerned about Preston Park who reside there. To date, I have not received those responses, and they are not in the staff report for the other board members. And I think it's really unfortunate, but it's appropriate that this be put over so that these questions could be answered. I do not like delaying things. That's why I followed up and requested back on September 22nd. I was assured that I would receive those. I have not. Whether or not they're in the possession of someone in this room right now is not as important to me as the fact that I want those to be in the staff report so the board members can see them and compare them to the full survey that was done, that was attached prior in the September 14th, I think it was, agenda. So I respectfully request that this matter be continued to the November, I think, 16th meeting. Thank you.
Michael, is there a staff response for that?
Yes, your request was received. We responded to it both in writing, and I emailed that response to you. You indicated in the receipt email that if someone, because that request was received the day before the meeting, you said if someone was prepared to verbally respond to it at the meeting, and I know that I emailed that response to you. We also had a subsequent email on a concern about a proposed action. This is the first time that I've heard that you did not receive the response that was sent to you.
Well, if I may, without getting into an argument on this situation, basically I submitted an email to FORA on September 22nd. Ms. Spillman responded to it by saying that she would follow up to make sure the responses were received by contacting Mr. Norris. If you emailed, or those email responses were sent out, they certainly were not received by me. And I don't know if they've been received by anyone else, but the simple fact of the matter is they're not attached to the staff report. Now, for purpose of clarification, this is the second set of questions. I did send questions out in August, which in fact, the questions and responses are attached to the staff reports. I'm referring to the second set, which was sent out on the 14th of September, which I apologize for the lateness because the meeting was at that time. At that time, Mr. Norris, you informed me that you had, in fact, the ability to answer some of those questions. Councilman Brown was present when you stated that to me. We were outside of this room. I took you at your word, and I have no reason to doubt your word. The matter was continued to this meeting in the hope that, in fact, the responses would be full. I sent you an email asking for those responses to be sent to me so I could refer to them for completeness. Again, I did not receive a response. If they were sent out, perhaps my computer didn't work properly, although I haven't had a problem with it. But if anyone else in this board has received those, I certainly would like a copy of them. I am very concerned about the fact that this procedure by Alliance and in the past by the way in which this matter has been handled through Marina Council, when we've had Alliance come before us. So I've been very thorough in my requests. I've been very thorough and accurate as far as following up and making sure things were done. And I don't have those responses. So I am asking this matter to be kicked over or continued for that particular month. Thank you.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I had seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion by the board.
Yes.
Comments? Yes.
First of all, I'm inclined to support it because I think any time one of our fellow board members would like some more information, I'm inclined to support that. But could the executive officer maybe enlighten us as to what kind of complexity this would entail, given that this would defer yet another month the Preston Park budget?
Well, certainly we've mentioned this several times in past months, and this item has been deferred repeatedly without respect to or comment about whether anybody's email is working or not. We certainly recognize that emails don't always work. We've had a few issues ourselves. But with all due respect, this particular item has been in front of the FORA board to review for months. Typically doing these budget increases are important because budget increase that we're asking for would also include approval to do capital expenditures, which are important for the tenants and for the maintenance of the property. We asked for that the board consider approving option A, which would give a 3% rent increase, and at the same time it would allow us to move ahead with what we believe are needed capital improvements. And we've asked for this for several months. There is both a revenue issue and there is a health and safety issue, both of which we think are appropriate for the board to take action on. If it was a month delay, there, of course, always are delays in both capital and revenue source. It's thousands of dollars. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but there is an impact. I am very concerned about both of those. But if it's the board's decision that we would move another month, we would make sure that we hand deliver our responses. Maybe through the mail would work. Snail mail sometimes is better than email.
Any other comments by board members? Yes, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would strongly urge that the board does hear this issue today. We have been through it many, many times. The proper management of Preston Park is, I think, of paramount importance, and that we exercise that in a proper way. I think we should certainly hear today the concerns from Marina on additional questions and the inputs from the public. But I would submit that the alleged 1 month delay could lead to another blizzard of questions, which has been the pattern on every issue related to Preston Park. And we would potentially face delay after delay after delay in the quest for some level of perfection that may or may not be material to making the decisions we have to make today. And I would say that we should listen very closely and ask, are these sufficient concerns that we need to redo the work on the proposal in front of us, or can we in good conscience move forward to properly manage this property in terms of its capital upkeep and the financial cash flows that all of us would like to expect from the property. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments by board members?
Yes, please, if I may. The reason that it was continued one time, Bill, was because the staff report had the summary page that only related to Preston Park. It did not have the full survey, and that was acknowledged by the FORA staff, and that's why it was continued. That's not the result of anything that I did or anyone in Marina did. I just want to make sure that the city, that FORA board is fully aware of all aspects of this. And then that was followed up by the actual survey being put onto the staff report. I, in turn, submitted questions that were asked of that, and those questions are questions that have not been answered. I understand the concern that board members may have as far as revenue, but I think more importantly is the fact that when you are making a decision, you should be able to make the decision based on the time available to review all of the necessary information and documentation. And I'm just going on record that I did not receive responses to questions that were sent approximately almost a month ago. Thank you.
Okay, other comments? Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am someone who also appreciates having complete information before I make decisions. I'm not sure what those questions were, but I think it would be important for us as board members to all have the answers to them. I wonder, though, if the maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion would be comfortable with the concept that we might take an action today to approve the budget without a rent increase, but directing that the capital improvements go forward, perhaps just as a provisional action, so that there's something on the table for, and whether we revisit it next month when the questions come back could be another option.
Any other comments by board members?
If I may, as to the Supervisor Parker's position, I feel comfortable with that approach. However, I am concerned, and I've put on record my concern, that the capital improvement, the reserve funds, half of those funds belong to the City of Marina. So as far as any capital improvements, if Supervisor Parker wants to make that motion, but put it as a qualification on that prior to any capital improvements being made, that the City of Marina be contacted for the purpose of approving those advances. Thank you.
I would agree.
Any other comments by board members? Out to the public, any comments by members of the public? Please.
We were talking about earlier about process. I'm kind of disappointed Mr. Donahue didn't stay, but I will tell you at the end of the last meeting, I personally have sat in this meeting for 21 hours since June waiting for this to come. But I'm going to say I'm in favor of continuing it into the next meeting because we don't yet have accurate documents. And I'm afraid you guys can't make a good decision with accurate documents. I trust Mr. Brown and Mr. O'Connell to do the best that they can for the residents of Preston Park. Thank you.
Other members of the public?
I actually have a question for legal counsel. Ms. Parker suggested that perhaps we could do capital improvements, approve that part of it, but not approve the budget. But my question is, don't you have to have an approved budget before you can make those kinds of expenditures? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by the public? Okay, let's go to legal counsel for an answer.
And if, Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify, what I suggested was that we adopt the budget without the rent increase and give direction that the capital improvements projects go forward. That was my comment, so I don't, and I think it was just not, maybe I didn't state it clearly, but I will just say for the record that I support the current motion on the table.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to defer this topic till next month, and we have a second, I believe. Any comments, more input? Okay, all in, yes.
Convoluted confusion here. We are in litigation with the City of Marina over this, so I don't know with our discussions if this is proper for us to even proceed in what has been suggested here. Due respect to Director O'Connell. So does our attorney advise that we even move forward with this motion, considering the litigation?
You're asking the motion of delaying or deferring this to next month? That's all we're doing.
I know, but it's what he asked for is, well, I won't go any further.
No, I mean, go ahead. I mean,
I'll get in trouble.
The motion we have on the floor merely is to move this item to next month. Where Jane's comment earlier, that has nothing to do with this motion. That's, you just brought that up for information or your druthers. Okay? Okay, the motion on the floor, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? 100%. Thank you very much. We will revisit this next month. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the base reuse plan reassessment. First, the overview and update of the reassessment process. And Michael? Steve? Okay.
Sure. Members of the board, tonight before you are 2 items with the base reuse plan reassessment. The first item is a presentation from EMC Planning Group giving an overview and an update on the base reuse plan reassessment process. The second item is an item that was deferred from the last board meeting, which is the FORA board would move to...
Michael, I think we lost our quorum. You want to make sure that those people realize it's important that we have a quorum here. We're not going to get anything done. We have an action item on this. We have the quorum here now, still? Would you lock the door, please?
Okay. The second item is to follow up with the item deferred from the last board meeting, which is to receive the final scoping report, which this reflects comments received at the since the August 15th, 2012 draft scoping report, and includes an errata sheet, and also there is an errata sheet at the board tables tonight, which reflects requested items that were made from Monterey Peninsula College, and there was one item left out from a previous comment letter, and that's included in this errata sheet tonight at the board tables as well. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Michael Gross, Managing Principal of EMC Planning.
Thank you, Jonathan. Wouldn't be the first time I spoke and lost the crowd. So I appreciate everybody staying, and I appreciate that we have a forum. We're going to do a short PowerPoint presentation. So I just want to try to keep it as brief as possible, but give you enough information so that you can move forward with decisions on the reassessment process. Again, my name is Michael Groves. I'm the president of EMC Planning Group in Monterey, and I'm here tonight representing the FORA board and FORA staff. With me tonight is David Zender from EPS and Richard James from EMC to help answer any questions we might have at the end of the presentation. We're going to give a short PowerPoint presentation, and the whole presentation will be basically about the reassessment process that we've been going through, a little snapshot of the reassessment document itself, what to expect out of that, and a review of the schedule. If you remember, the mandate for the base reuse plan reassessment is January 1, 2013. You've seen this slide before. It's a slide that basically shows you the Sierra Club settlement agreement and what's in Chapter 8 of the FORA Master Resolution. And down at the bottom, you'll see January 1, 2013 is the drop-dead date for having the reassessment complete. You've also seen this slide, which is a slide that shows the various steps that were created in doing the reassessment process. The first step that we created was the scoping process. It consisted of public workshops, a market study, and a reuse plan status report and review. The second step is a summary scoping report. We actually prepared that report and released it in August. We're actually asking the board tonight to receive the scoping report. Step 3 is the reassessment document itself. That's the preview that you're going to have tonight, as well as it will be released next week. And then the reassessment report final, which will be having the board make comment on the reassessment report, give us any errata they'd like to see on the reassessment report, and receive that report. And we'd like to see that happen in November. Let's talk a little bit about the scoping report. It was released August 15th after a public process that consisted of a kickoff meeting with the FORA board in April. And then we had 5 public workshops that were co-sponsored with FORA by the local jurisdictions and the Sierra Club. With those public workshops during May and June, we had 403 participants in those workshops. We also received 335 emails, letters, comment forms that were submitted to FORA during the May-September timeframe of this year. Copies of the scoping report were available on the FORA website, at the FORA offices. They were on CD, and we made some hard copies to go in the local libraries. That scoping report was an informational document, and what's important about having that as an informational document for the board and the community is really we're just trying to go through and set the baseline for what has occurred in the last 15 years. That was based essentially on the public input that we received, reviewing the base reuse plan, its final EIR, and the regional plans that are in place throughout the regional area, Tri-County regional area. The market and economic analysis was a big component of the preparation of the scoping report. Based on the request from the public, we held another workshop, additional scoping report workshop to receive public input on August 29th. So that was actually the 6th workshop that we held, along with several FORA board meetings that we presented at. Comments were received outside of the comment period for the scoping report. Just want to assure the public and the board that we have looked at every comment that we've received, both the staff and ourselves, throughout the process, both within the comment period and outside the comment period, and taken those into consideration. For the FORA board, once they receive the scoping report, we will republish the scoping report, and we can do that as early as next week with the errata included in the scoping report. So the idea is to republish that on CD and incorporate the errata so you'll have a final scoping report. Let's talk about the reassessment report. Reassessment report is what's coming forward. We are in the process of completing the reassessment report. It incorporates the scoping report. Obviously, all of the information that the public gave to us throughout that process, the EPS market analysis, and our review of the base reuse plan is dovetailed into the reassessment report. The categories that we've created for the reassessment report, within those categories we'll have subjects and topic areas. So the board has talked a lot about, tonight they talked about the Veterans Cemetery. That's one of the topic areas we have within one of the categories within the reassessment report. But we have 5 categories, each with subject areas and topics, and those 5 categories, as you can see on the board, are the base reuse plan modifications and corrections, and essentially that category is essentially corrections. It is essentially a list of corrections to the base reuse plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Category 2 is prior board actions and regional plan consistency. Category 3 is the implementation of policies and programs. Those are existing policies and programs within the base reuse plan. Category 4 is policy and program modifications. So that would be either new policies and programs or existing policies and programs that are modified in some new form. And Category 5 is FORA procedures and operations. The reassessment report then essentially is categories to subject areas to topics, and topics to potential options. Options that the FORA board would consider in 2013 and beyond. And I put on your desk, and there's some copies in the back, this handout, which basically just gives you a visual cue of what the categories look like. And you'll see under each one of those categories, for the most part, there is some form of a description, issue areas, key issues that we've identified as a part of the process or the public has identified as a part of the process. And so this is just a visual to give you a sense. It'll be actually a figure within the report. So an example of what that would look like is, let's take this first example, Category 4, policies and program modifications. This would be a brand new policy and program or an existing policy and program that's modified in some new way. Subject area is land use. Topic area is policies, enact policies on land use compatibility adjacent to Cal State University Monterey Bay. That was a comment we received during the public outreach process. Potential option would be a status quo by the board, or the board could ask staff or direct staff to develop land use compatibility policies. Again, when you see the report, you will see descriptions, key issues, etc. None of the descriptions, key issues, the policy options or potential options for the board, none of that is exhaustive. All of those will be basically a menu item that you would bring back as a board member and say, this is one of my priorities. I want this acted on by the board. Then staff would have to develop more information on that, just as you're doing with some of the board items that you do on a regular basis. Develop more information on those items and develop those options. Again, there may be If you ask everybody in the room, everybody could probably come up with a different option on this, and we've come up with a couple, but there's many more options that you might want to consider as you go forward. The exception to the rule is Category 1, so I'll just go through the categories quickly and just give you some examples so you might understand those categories. The exception is Category 1. Category 1 is modifications and corrections is what we titled it. It's less modifications and more corrections than anything. An example is in this first one, it's a recreation and open space element. We have the word Fort Ord Beach State Park when the actual title is Fort Ord Dunes State Park. It's a minor correction. We have some figures that have some corrections. Modify the BLM to Fort Ord National Monument since it's designated. Misspelled words, symbols on legends that are not there on the maps, those types of things. So that's your Category 1, fairly simple category. Category 2 is prior board actions and regional plan consistency. Category 2 options address two types of possible modification to the base reuse plan. The first type of possible modification to the base reuse plan is based on actions the FORA board has already taken, namely modifications to the base reuse plan, i.e. consistency determinations or actions the board has already taken that would be implemented. These are certification of prior board decisions, actions already taken that do not require consideration by the FORA board. The second type of possible modifications are the addition of new policies or programs or expansion of existing policies or programs within the base reuse plan to ensure the base reuse plan's consistency with regional plans. These are a legal requirement of FORA. And because the base reuse plan was created in 1997, there's a lot of things that have happened in the regional plans, air quality plan, transportation plans that have changed. Those things need to be incorporated now into the base reuse plan. So that's what that second category is. These are modifications that may not require significant deliberation, but do require additional FORA staff investigation and consideration by the FORA board. Category 3, this is implementation of base reuse plan policies and programs. Jurisdictional and FORA policies and programs which implementation is either complete, ongoing, or incomplete. So let's just take an example at the bottom. This is develop interpretive signs for placement in habitat management areas. This is an incomplete policy or program, biological resource program. The jurisdiction shall develop interpretive signs and place them in the habitat management areas, et cetera, et cetera. The responsibility is marina, seaside, and the county. The interpretive signs have not been installed. So it's just a policy that has not been completed at this point in time, actually a program in this case. So that's Category 3. And you'll see a series of these. We actually have them listed in the reassessment document, a series of these that haven't been completed, and the option for the board to make some decisions about how they want to move this forward going forward with either the land use jurisdictions taking responsibility for them, or FORA changing some direction or policy potentially to try to enhance the ongoing and the incomplete policies. So this is something for the board to consider as they move forward in terms of how they'd like to deal with the existing policies and programs. Area 4, Category 4, policy and program modifications. These are areas of new policy and program modifications or existing policy and programs that may have some new twist or new information provided to them. The example here is potential for the National Monument and tourism to be a catalyst to economic growth in the region. The background information you already know. It's been designated by the President. The description is the potential exists for the designation of the Fort Ord National Monument to be a new economic development program for the former Fort Ord. Tourism is already an important component of the peninsula, et cetera, et cetera. Potential options, status quo option, prepare a study to potentially market opportunities to relate to the monument, adopt policies and programs to encourage promotion of the monument, and there could be a number of other options that fall into that. In all of these categories, you'll notice, or at least some of the latter categories, you'll notice we have the public comments summarized underneath. A large number of these Category 4 and 5 options come from public comment. So we're responding to the myriad of comments that we received over the course of the last 6 months and providing a summary of each one of those comments. And again, you can find all of those comments within the scoping report, which will be incorporated into this document. I also want to say that in category 4 and 5, where we're talking about new policy, and 5 where we're talking about procedures, we have over 50 topic areas for the board to consider. So when you come back and look at it, obviously one of the things you'll want to do is prioritize those topic areas. But again, there was a lot of input from the public, and so that's how that many topic areas came about. Category 5, procedures and operations. This is FORA's existing master resolution and how they go about their business. There was a number of comments from the public about certain items within this. I'll give you an example here. Is regularly track and report on progress in implementing base reuse plan policies and programs. The extent to which the policies and programs have been implemented or are in the process of being implemented is a key measure of the overall progress in implementing the base reuse plan. That's been discussed a lot in front of the board. Description and key issues. To date, implementation and status of base reuse plan policies and programs has not been regularly tracked or reported. Tracking incomplete policies and programs is a mechanism for focusing on actions to further implement the base reuse plan. So this is an example of what I was talking about earlier, where the board may say, we want to have a tracking program. We just want to report annually on these programs. How are they getting implemented? That type of thing. This gives you a little more insight to what's going on in terms of completing programs or knowing which programs are ongoing. Again, potential options for the board: status quo, direct the FORA staff to develop a process or mechanism for regularly reviewing these types of policies and programs. And then we have a summary of public comments. So that's the 5 categories. I will review the schedule with you. The schedule, if you remember, we started back in April, background research, market study, and public outreach. We prepared the scoping report in July, released it in August. The public input workshop, the 6th one that we had, was August 29th. We asked the board to receive the scoping report in September. You did not get to that item on the agenda because of the long hearing that you had. So we're back in front of you in October to receive the scoping report and the errata. Our expectation is that if you have any further comments on errata, that you add those tonight to the errata within your staff report, and then receive the scoping report. In October, going forward, we are going to release the reassessment document or report. We are going to have a public workshop on October 30th. It's a Tuesday night in this room to receive comments on the reassessment document. Board consideration, direction, and receive the base reuse plan reassessment report with an errata will be in the November board meeting. You can see down at the bottom that there is a workshop time set at 6:30 here in the boardroom for that October 30th hearing. We will have public comments received by Wednesday, November 7th at 5 o'clock in the FORA offices. So that's the deadline we're putting out to get comments if you want to get them into the board packet. We will take comments after the 7th as the board has informally directed, but it won't get into the board packet in any formal way. It will be attached to the board packet. Let me review the schedule with you just specifically so everybody understands the schedule date by date. We're doing the preview tonight of the reassessment document. We'll release the document on October 17th at the administrative committee meeting so people can actually get a copy of it and take it back to their jurisdictions. We'll have it on CD for the most part. We will probably make 4 or 5 copies that can go in local public libraries. So if you want to get a copy of it, please ask for it to get a CD or more than one CD for bringing back to your jurisdictions. We also think it's a good idea for the jurisdictions to grab a few more CDs than they did last time and put them on their counters at their planning departments so the public can come get them from you. So if someone lives in PG, they can go to the PG planning department and get a copy of the reassessment document instead of having to drive to FORA. So we're just suggesting that. So we'll have enough for you to hopefully do that if I can get all my CD burners to work at one time. October 30th is the workshop. October 17th to November 7th is the comment period to receive comments on the reassessment document. November 7th to 16th, FORA staff and ourselves will begin an errata sheet on the reassessment report based on any comments we're getting and any corrections we think need to be added. November 7th to the 16th, comments received will be distributed to the FORA board members along with the errata sheet as a part of their packet for the board. And the comments that we receive before the 7th will go in the board packet. The comments we receive after the 7th will be given to the board members for the meeting. November 16th, FORA board will take a look at the reassessment document, make any comments on it, give us any errata corrections, and receive the report. And moving forward, I want to just talk a little bit about, this is my last 2 slides, just so you don't fall asleep on me, talk about the reassessment report. I think it's really important to understand the distinction between what happens this year and what happens next year. So let me talk about that for a second. The reassessment report, as I said, is a building off the scoping report. So you had all that baseline information, kind of a review of what happened in the last 15 years. The reassessment report said, well, a bunch of issues came out of that. So we're not calling them necessarily issues, but they're really basically subjects and topic areas. We put those into 5 categories. What we're doing is asking you to look at it as a menu of subject areas and topics for the board to consider in 2013 and beyond. The question is not, what do I do with this particular topic? The question is, do we have all the topics? All right, so when we're asking you tonight to look at this, in October or November, we'll ask the board to consider and discuss the menu. We're not asking you to consider and discuss the Veterans Cemetery or to consider and discuss Cal State University Monterey Bay or any other topic that's in there. There's lots of topics. Just want to know, did we get everything you wanted on the menu? That's the question for the board. And then at the November board meeting, once you're satisfied with the menu, we'll ask the board to receive the report, and we can, again, use the errata to add anything we need to add to the menu. In 2013, FORA staff can ask the board to prioritize the categories and subjects. So the FORA board or the FORA staff may say to the board, well, category 1 is just corrections to the plan. That's easy. Let's move forward with that. That could be an early 2013 action by the board. Let's get that done. Category 2 is essentially fairly straightforward, simple, getting things consistent with regional plans, making sure that the past actions are reflected in the base reuse plan. Could be a fairly simple early action item for the board. And then I think it's going to get a little tougher when you get into category 4 and 5. In 2013, you're going to have to look at those 50 topic areas and say, how do I want to prioritize? What's important to this board? What things do we want to take actions on first? Ask staff to come back to you with more information. So what we're saying is, again, prioritize categories and subject. FORA staff can ask the board to consider and give direction from the menu on various topics and potential options. You as a board member may say, you know, I think I can come up with 3 or 4 different potential options about how we could go about this particular topic item, and I think all of those are important. This list of options is not an exhaustive list. So what we're asking from the board, again, tonight is we're asking you, are there any questions on the PowerPoint presentation? Pretty straightforward and simple. And receive the scoping report. Are there any additional errata items that you might have that you think are important to add to that before the board receives the scoping report? That's really what we're here for tonight. Going forward, take a look at the menu. Let us know if we got everything on the menu. Thank you very much.
Very good job, Michael. Thank you much. Any questions by members of the board? Yes, Justin.
Michael, I just wanted to check in regarding an email I'd sent to you, Steve, and others regarding blight and clarification on Chapter 4 or Section 4, pages 222 through 227, just to make certain that you had received some additional comments from the university. In particular, we'd gone back and read what I thought was an excellent section, but just wanted to clarify and make certain that it was added that 95 buildings remain from the university standpoint that need to be removed, and to make certain that that was added into the report. And also, if we could distinguish that table that was included in that section to make certain that what it does now is, and it's a very good table, but it shows everything that exists still. And I'm hoping, if it's possible, to distinguish what exists that's actually intended or being reused from those that actually need to be torn down or are scheduled to be removed, and hoping that that can at least be added or addressed if possible.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. And you are talking about the scoping report at this point. Yes. Okay. I'm going to have Richard, hands-on Richard, to answer the question since he's in it every day.
Okay. Hopefully I'll remember all the pieces you just brought up. But I know we did add a number of things based on several different letters from CSUMB to the scoping report. Addendum, which you should have a copy of in your packet. As far as the buildings, though, specifically, we did not find accurate data base-wide on which buildings were and weren't removed. We have a number of situations where we found data that was inaccurate, so we do not have any good data on that included in the scoping report or added to it. If you would like to, in your motion to receive the scoping report, direct that we make an attempt to add that at this point, we can still go ahead and do that. Time constraints didn't allow us in the past few weeks to do that.
Sure, it'd be great if possible, and I don't know if it's as simple, hopefully, and I realize it's probably not, but maybe just to have conversations with the various jurisdictions and different, like the university, and we might be able to help direct you to give you some better understanding of that. But I realize it might be more complicated than that. The other question I did want to raise, and I know this is something that I've talked with other constituents, is the dollar amount that you have identified for Blythe removal in that section. And I think it's in the 70 million, and it's based on a 2004 report. We're not the only ones that are just wondering if that's a low estimate and if there's some way to figure that out. And the reason why I'm saying that, Richard, is that while we recognize the university has some expensive buildings because of the concrete structures, we estimate that of those 95 remaining structures, if we were to take them down one at a time, I think the number amount is about 32 million total. And if we were to do it economies to scale, it would run in 22 million. And if you email me, I can get you that more exact estimate. But our folks are very good at it. We've been doing it a while, and we feel very comfortable with that number. So we were surprised that given what we had calculated just for 95, and again, I recognize the concrete structures are more expensive, how that number of 72 compared. And so I don't know if there's a way to evaluate that further, but we just wanted to raise that item. Or if not, perhaps that in moving forward that we can direct to have some sort of emphasis of a study to really get a better understanding of the actual cost it would to remove those 2,000 such structures.
Okay. And I'm not sure how the board wishes to proceed as far as cataloging any additional changes to the errata, but I've got those two items on my list from Justin, so I'll leave that up to the board's discretion as to how they want to direct us to add things to the errata. And I should state too, Justin, that the one of the topics covered in the reassessment report would be demolition of buildings. That's on the list.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say that I think this is a very good process, and it's I'm really liking the way it's unfolding. I think we will have a lot of juicy topics to take up, and I just appreciate the EMC group really going through and laying things out in such an orderly way. So I think that'll be very helpful for us. And I did see that my comments have been included, so thank you very much. And one of the issues that I raised looks as though was responded to. The water chart on page 78 of our current board packet, I think is a start, but what it shows is allocation and then how much water is being used. I think what we need is a more complete table that shows by jurisdiction how much water has been allocated to each jurisdiction, and then within that to which projects. Some of them haven't been constructed yet, so there's not a consumption number attached. So I think that's the kind of chart that we really need. And I understand FORA staff may have that chart, so it's just a matter of getting the right one. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. Any other questions by board members?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Felix.
I mentioned during our wide-ranging conversation of the rehearing of the previous motion on the veteran cemetery issue that we had taken earlier in October, on October 4th, a very extensive report from our staff that indicated pretty much everything that's ever happened with the cemetery on the former Fort Ord. And as part of that staff report, it was identified that FORA had previously taken some actions in 1996 vis-a-vis the cemetery, and that those were not properly captured in the various documents related to the sum total of FORA's public record, I guess. And this may be a little bit confusing, so what I'm going to do is, if we need some further clarification on this, Diana Ingersoll is ready to give some further detail. But bottom line is, we want to make sure that, and this can probably be captured in Category 2, prior board actions and regional plan consistency, that the City of Seaside's concerns vis-a-vis the cemetery get included in the space reuse plan reassessment. Similar to what Jason suggested, an hour and a half ago, that we might be able to revisit this in some fashion tonight. I know you said we're not talking about the cemetery specifically, but we want to make sure that the concerns are at least reflected in this document. So if my comments are not clear enough, Diana stands ready to address how the City of Seaside feels that hasn't been entirely captured in all of FORA's public documents.
Our executive director says that's no problem.
Yeah, and I will also reiterate that, just so you know, Diana wrote a great report. We track that as a part of the City of Seaside's council meeting. We've got the report, the attachments to the report. We're referencing those as a part of the reassessment document. So because the scoping report was already done, basically, right, we have a whole reassessment piece in there on the Veterans Cemetery. So we have those tracked within there and referenced within there. So there will be a tracking or a chain of command, if you will.
And I recognize that much of that is in there. I just wanted to specifically make sure that the board's actions in '96 were reflected, and that I don't know. So I'll have to go reread it myself, but let's make sure that that's in there.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Justin?
It's not a question. It's more a comment on the coming reassessment report itself. And it was something that was talked about in a group presentation that was done already by EMC about a week or two ago. And it's really how figuring out how to take this information once we're given it and how to move forward. And really just to try to, we need to start thinking about it as board now. And really, because there is an enormous amount of information and recommendations that's going to come forth. And we're going to have to figure out how to move forward with it as quickly as possible. And trying to figure out how we can direct staff to come together and create a work plan. And I realize there's some order to these things, but we need to at least start thinking about that sooner than later. And so that hopefully we can have staff positioned to be giving us some direction early on in November of how we're going to move forward and how we're in some sort of orderly fashion be working forward to addressing all these recommendations. So I just want to get board members accustomed to this, and really if we can start thinking of direction or giving staff direction and just raising that item.
Okay. Other board member comments? Yes.
Building off of Justin's comments, it would be helpful to me to understand procedurally which of these categories we can take action on without needing to possibly trigger public hearings and a CEQA review, and which ones may require a CEQA review. And in light of the time and resources that may entail, what happens during the interim period. And this actually gets back to Felix's comment that if there are just updates and corrections that wouldn't trigger a CEQA review, for example, anything with respect to the cemetery, if that is the case, I would hope that we could make those changes sooner, before going through the whole CEQA process, and not hold up the cemetery and other such activities if those in fact have already been properly vetted and don't require CEQA. My observation is simply that that the Category 4 and Category 5 decisions, my judgment, depending on what the board decides, probably will require an EIR. That takes time, and I don't want to delay, in particular, getting back to the earlier conversation, I don't want to delay our ability to move forward on the cemetery June of next year.
Thank you. EMC want to make a comment on that?
My response would be, I think that you have a pretty good sense of the issues. The Category 1 is pretty much a no-brainer. Category 2, I would think, is almost a no-brainer. I mean, Category 2, essentially, you've got prior board actions. I don't think require neither Category 1 or Category 2. The first step of it would require CEQA. The second portion of creating new policy or modifying policy that would make it consistent with the regional plans is a legal requirement of the board. So I think it's a no-brainer, but I think it would require some form of CEQA. Then when you get to Category 3, those are ongoing policies and incomplete policies that were already reviewed under CEQA by the base reuse plan. So those are just continuations. So unless you change something, and you're right, Category 4 and Category 5 are things that you'll need to look at. Category 5 is procedural. So in a way, it may or may not require a CEQA depending on what the board's action is. But Category 4 is going to be the meat, and that's where you're going to hit those policy decisions that will require, essentially, if it would be like if you were doing an LCP update for the city of Carmel or a general plan update for the city of Carmel, we're going to change a bunch of policies. You're going to have a CEQA document with it. So.
And can you speak to what happens during that interim period? What is the governing document, and how do we handle projects or decisions that may span the current base reuse plan and some future updated plan?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Michael and the board, but what I would suggest the conversation might be, and I underline the word might, is that you might say, let's do Category 1, Category 2 items. We'll have a negative declaration on the second half of the Category 2 items, which is the regional plan stuff, and let's get those done and get those into the plan. Let's look at a procedural item to how the board might oversee the incomplete policies and programs that we already have. Let's look at a procedural way to report on those, to work with the jurisdictions to move them forward where they're struggling with certain things. That might be another item that you would prioritize. And then you would have to start, I would think that the board would want to have some type of a workshop where they sat down with the Category 4 and 5. I mean, even if it was a day-long retreat, and said, what do we want to do with this? You know, and how do we want to prioritize and categorize? Because they do come in chunks, and they come in subject areas. So you can look at the various subject areas to determine. But again, in the end of the day, you're probably, if you take on a large chunk of those, you're going to have some environmental document at the end of the road.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm not sure if I heard the answer to the question
The answer to the first question that you had, which was in the interim, it's whatever plan is adopted at the time. So, I mean, if that was the question is your active plan is the active plan today that was adopted in 1997. If you update it with Category 1 and 2, that becomes the active plan.
So any project, at the point that a project or a zoning change comes to the FORA board for consistency, it is the plan at that time. And it sounds like if we proceed as you're suggesting, we're actually going to have a couple different iterations of a base reuse plan. Category 1 and 2, most of those incorporated early. 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah,
it may take a little longer.
Instead of, and I think your instincts are really good. Instead of having your general plan in your city adopted and it's going to be good for the next 15 to 20 years, this is going to be a series of updates of the, quote, base reuse plan, which is a general plan for this area.
In light of that, I'll make a request that we and in expectation that the board will approve option 2 with respect to the cemetery at the next meeting, or if it requires 2 votes, so be it, that we make sure that those issues be taken up early such that we can get resolution to them by June 30th of 2013.
Okay. Any other board member comments? Saying none, out to the public. Any comments by members of the public? Oh, great. Okay, back to the board. We need a motion to receive the report, the scoping report.
So move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Oops. Well, that was. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Our next item, number D, is a request by Mayor Bachhoffner for reconsideration of item 8A on the August 29th, 2012 FORA board agenda. I will turn this over to Mayor Bachhoffner for discussion.
Thank you. So really I have 2 questions for us to consider here today. And just so we're all clear, the reason I asked for reconsideration is not that I personally feel that a formulaic approach is incorrect, and I've said that many times that I believe a formulaic approach is correct, but our colleague Jane Parker had expressed some fairly concise and sincere desire to further discuss some of her points on this issue. And from my vantage point, we rushed through the conversation a little bit too hastily when this came up in, I guess it was in August. I guess it was September. At any rate, so I thought that it would be appropriate for us to vote to reconsider, so that we could give Jane a little bit more time to fully disclose her concerns and make her pitch, and see if she can change anybody's mind. I don't know, Jane, whether you still feel the need to do that, so my first question would be, do you wish to continue discussion?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I would like to continue the discussion, although I will say that it will be fairly brief, because in the intervening time, my staff and I have been in touch with the FORA staff and have really worked out, answered a lot of the questions that weren't getting answered in the discussion. So I'm comfortable moving forward. I would like a discussion because there were a couple of issues, as you might remember, that were of concern to me. And in talking to staff, it sounds as though there's not a disagreement there, and so I have some language to suggest that will allay some of my concerns, and I think that it's consistent with what is intended both by the community stakeholders and by the FORA staff.
Would you like to bring those items up now or defer them to some future discussion?
Well, if we're having the discussion on the so I'm not quite sure procedurally how we do this, but if we're essentially opening up the discussion on the formulaic approach again to, well, I don't know where we are. So I don't know what the appropriate time is to try to do or say anything.
Procedurally, you've had final action on this item. It's technically it's not really a reconsideration, although I think that's a good layman's term for it. The proper approach, parliamentary approach, would be to bring back some suggested amendments to the actions that have already, the resolutions that have already been adopted. And it may be, from what you've said, and this is just my suggestion, not my legal advice, it may be easier for people to understand it if you had it in a future board packet, and here's a list of changes we'd like to make to the resolution, and then be able to look at that during the discussion.
Thank you. And through the chair,
yes,
yes, I can say what those things are. I do have them in writing and can provide them to the staff so that it can come forward the next time. So your pleasure.
Okay, considering your comments, would the maker of the motion to reconsider be willing to withdraw his motion?
Sure, and what I would do then is at executive committee, I would certainly support the desire that Member Parker has to advance some further discussion in the form of an amendment to previous resolutions or whatever. So I'm happy to withdraw it, and we can handle it the way that the agency council has suggested. I think that's totally appropriate.
And that's basically it then for withdrawal. Okay. Any other comment? Thank you very much. A very civilized discussion, I must say.
As always.
Okay. Yes. Well, I want to do public comment. Okay, next off, I do appreciate the public sticking around to the end of the, it's been not quite as long as last meeting, but now I'm going to open up public comment period for any members of the public to comment. You'd have 3 minutes. You may speak on any item not on the agenda. Please, sir.
Mayor Ederlin, I suspect you will be the happiest person in Monterey County when Dave Parker returns. My name is Eric Peterson, and just for anybody who didn't notice, you folks have elevated yourselves to e-ticket ride status, and my suggestion is next time plan on using the whole room. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Great suggestion. Next.
Maybe we could help facilitate that. Ron Cheshire, retired member of Carpenters Local 605. I hadn't talked to President Anzini in quite a while, but I did get to talk to him yesterday a little bit, and I appreciate your comments at the beginning of the meeting regarding the facility. You know, several years ago in a parking lot actually not far from here, Michael Hulamard and I looked at one another and shook hands on the fact that the FORA board would be able to use this facility free of charge or at some minimal charge for its meetings and some reasonable committee meetings or so. And well, I know that you have more committees than I have fingers and toes, but you know, things have grown over the years, but the facility was promised to you, and so my word is my bond, and the members of Local 605 stand behind that. I have to make a confession, is that I also told Mr. Anzini that they really need to buy some new tables. You know, those we brought over from Carpenters Local 605, which was built in 1949, and I think the damn things were probably from there. I was the one that sat on the table. The metal fatigued, and I have no idea what was really wrong with the darn thing. It was obviously defective. And I told John that I would work on a way to maybe do some fundraising and help him get some new equipment here in the facility. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your support also of the things there.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm Hazel Tompkins, and I just wanted to say I didn't know that there were so many people in the county working so hard for all of us, and I'm glad I stumbled in here tonight. So thank you very much, and I'm glad you can laugh and be serious at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other member of the public? Okay, that closes the public comment period. Next on deck is the Executive Officer report. Michael, take it away.
I have nothing to add, Chair.
Another first, say the least. Okay, there's nothing on the Executive Officer's report. Any items from the members? Any items to bring up from our members?
Yes, Chairman. Bill Collins with the
Yes,
Base
Bill.
Realignment Closure Office. I'd just like to make an announcement that the Army has completed its third 5-year review. That document is a requirement of the Superfund cleanup, and document is available in our administrative record at fortordcleanup.com. There'll be a public notice next week, as well as a fact sheet available on our website. The next 5-year review is September of 2017.
Thank you. Any other items from members? Okay, again, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be adjourning this meeting in honor of Carl Izawa. He was a staunch supporter, did a lot of hard work. Everything we're doing here and was built on a foundation that he helped build. So may you rest in peace. Thank you very much for everybody showing up. Next regular meeting will be November 16th, 2012. Meeting's adjourned.